Everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the October 17th City of Boulder Planning Board meeting. We've got a quorum of 5 of us right now. The first item on our agenda is the approval of meeting minutes. We've got minutes from September 19th and September 24th that I think some folks have modified via email edits. Does anyone want to make a motion or suggest further edits?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, give me a second.
Sure, I'll second.
Okay, let's call a question. All in favor?
Aye. Oh,
And I'm abstaining because I wasn't there for them.
Okay. Often people will vote for them anyways because the reflection that you were not there is accurate. But just, it's your choice. Also, I don't think there's an abstention in our voting process.
You can actually abstain for the purposes of minutes if you weren't there.
Okay, cool. Right on, just not other stuff.
so for Cindy, you wanted 4-0, 4-1.
Yeah, so Cindy, that's a 4-1 with 1 abstaining. Next on our list is public participation. So if you're here to speak to us about one of the several public hearing items that we have tonight, one of which is a use review to allow personal service and professional office in an office building on North Street. The second one is amendment to a site review, site review for the Freihof project, and the third one is site review amendment for Western Disposal. Oh no, sorry, that's the call-up. The last one's a Boulder Energy Code and adoption of building codes. So if you're here to speak to us about any of those things, you get to wait till those come up. But if you want to talk to us about something else, this is the time to do that. Cindy, is anyone signed up? Okay, great. Luckily, I spent 8 minutes bumbling through that. Next thing up is the discussions of call-ups. We've got one call-up, which is a site review amendment for 2655 North 63rd Street, which is Western Disposal's campus. And so there's a new or a modification to that site review that's being run through at a staff level. So anybody have any questions on that or interested in calling it up?
I have a couple questions, if that's all right.
Is your mic on? Or? Okay.
So I read through the material. I'm curious, what entity has responsibility for any environmental contamination or cleanup at the Butte Mills site, which Western Disposal will be departing or has departed? I wasn't really clear.
I believe it's a state regulated setting, but in this particular case, there are no plans right now for that site. So this is focused strictly on the 63rd Street site.
Right, so my question is, once they depart and that site is left, and at some point it'll come back, and who will be responsible for any environmental contamination?
It's the state that
It'll be the
regulates
state.
that, yeah.
Okay. I was curious about, given the discussion of the East Boulder sub-community plan we had 2 weeks ago or whenever we had it, and the potential to reinvigorate some of the sensitive environmental features in natural areas, I wondered if it was at all possible to leave open the possibility for future consideration to widen or protect that southeast edge that contains a buffer zone for the mapped wetlands. It just struck me as long as we're taking a look at the entire area plan, is that something that at least could remain a topic for future conversation?
Well, in that buffer zone that's already established, or it's being established through the site review for the wetlands, there's certain types of mitigations or plantings or what have you that would occur in that area anyway. And so given that that's a future unadopted plan at this point, it really wouldn't necessarily apply to this site. So I think that there's mitigations that are being put in place already with the fact that it's a buffer zone. So I'm not sure that there's anything that could do to defer to after a plan is adopted.
Yeah, I wasn't so much asking about deferring, but rather as the larger area plan goes forward, does this preclude us from ever revisiting the buffer zone on this site? I just am curious to understand.
Well, Hella, excuse me, maybe you have some thoughts on that, but again, it's not yet adopted, so I'm not sure would apply to this site review.
Yeah, so for this particular development, the property owner would be subject to the standards that are in effect right now and not standards that might be applied in the future. If there were changes to the site plan, they would have to come back for site review amendment or minor modification. And if we had new regulations at that point in time or a different plan adopted, then those would apply at that time.
Okay, that's very helpful. I'm sorry, just two more questions. One is, so as I read this, the existing composting facility is moving or is closing or has been closed. And I'm curious, does this mean that does this preclude future opportunities to bring a composting facility back to that site?
Well, it would be a further site review amendment if they did do that, but I don't have the programming handy, and perhaps the applicant could answer the question.
Okay, so it's not that, nothing is closed forever. They could always come back with a use review or?
Sure,
Okay.
of course.
And just one last question. What does aspirations of achieving LEED certification mean? They use the term aspiration, and I didn't know whether that meant this was something that they were agreeing to, or?
Well, what they have to do is meet the city's rigorous standards, and it's the Energy Efficiency Code 2012 plus 30%. That's what got adopted a number of years ago. So that's what they have to meet. If they can exceed that through a LEED standard, that's something that the city doesn't require or even monitor what LEED level they would achieve. What we look at, of course, is the energy efficiency standards in the code.
So they might try, but they have other requirements that they have to meet, but LEEDs is not the requirement.
Yeah, there's some equivalencies or close to it to LEED in what our code already has. And so if they want to exceed that and go to net zero, for example, that's sort of above and beyond. It's the icing on the cake, so to speak.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate those
Sure.
answers. Thanks.
Yep. Anything else?
I think we're good. Thanks, Elaine.
If I can just I don't intend to call this up, but I hope to encourage the participation of Western Disposal in the East Boulder sub-community planning process. I think they have been involved to some extent so far, and I'd like to encourage them to continue.
Great, thanks. That'll take us to our public hearing items. The way this will work is we've got a presentation from staff on each item. Planning board will ask staff questions based on the material they've presented. Then the applicant will be able to present. We'll ask them a few questions, and then public comment will happen after that. And then we'll return the matter to the board, closing the public comment period, and we'll make our deliberations. So first agenda item 5A is for use review to allow personal service and professional office at 954 North Street. And it's LUR 2019-00025. Sloan, take it away.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to turn it over to Gabby Hart, who's the case manager on this application.
All right, thanks, Sloan. So the item before you tonight is a use review to allow professional office and personal service uses in an existing office building at 954 North Street. In the presentation, I'll cover the surrounding context of the sites, a brief site history, the review process, and the role of the board in reviewing the proposal, a quick summary of the public comment received, an overview of the proposal itself, the use review criteria analysis, and then I'll end with a recommendation to the board. So the building is located in that red dotted square. It's south of North Street, between 9th and 10th Streets. Just to the northwest is North Boulder Park, And then moving east, when you get to the commercial strip of Broadway, you have Community Plaza and Ideal Market. So the site is designated high-density residential in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, which consists of attached residential units and apartments and may include complementary uses. It is zoned residential high 5, which is primarily used for a variety of types of attached residential units and where complementary uses may be allowed. Subject property is located in the center of the map there. It's an existing office building. Currently, the area is a mix of higher density residential units and other non-residential uses such as medical offices, other professional offices. So there's the site. These are some examples of the multifamily and single-family residential buildings in the general vicinity. And then here are some examples of the non-residential uses, which includes that building on the lower left, which is actually directly neighboring west of the subject property. And that building includes, it's a mixed-use condo building, which has residential, professional, office, as well as personal service uses. So a quick site history. It was built in 2002 when the property was zoned community business and professional offices were allowed by right. And then in 2004, the area was rezoned to RH5 by Ordinance 7377. And now current day, there are 18 individually leased office spaces currently operating as professional office uses. And the request is to include personal service uses in this, as well as formalize their compliance with current zoning requirements for professional offices in RH5. So based on the use table and the use standards in the land use code, both professional offices and personal service uses require a use review. Planning board action is required because these are non-residential uses in a residential zoning district. Written notice was sent to the property owners within 600 feet, and a notice was posted on the property. The only comment that staff received was regarding parking concerns, and this will be covered later in the presentation, but as a quick note, the site does exceed the minimum parking requirements. So the ground level of this building includes 16 parking spaces. 8 are in the small parking lot behind the building, as you can see in that aerial. And then the other 7 are podium style at the ground level underneath the building. And so this exceeds the 12 required spaces. And then 9 bicycle parking spaces are provided via this U-rack, which is just east adjacent to the building, when only 4 are required. And this is the second and third floor of the building, which each have 9 offices as well as restrooms and a reception area for clients. So the proposal is that all the offices can be leased as either professional office or personal service uses in any configuration. The hours of operation are proposed to be 8 a.m. through 8 p.m., Sunday through Saturday, although usually there are only occasional weekend hours for these offices. So to dig a little deeper into the proposed use categories for the building, professional office uses are defined as offices of firms or organizations providing professional service to individuals and businesses. So this includes things like accountants, architects, realtors, and therapists. Personal service uses are establishments that provide personal service for the convenience of the neighborhood. And these can include anything from physical therapy to acupuncture to yoga. And so the major operating characteristics that all of these have in common is that it's usually only 1 to 2 clients being served at a time. Typically, they're 1-hour appointments. Each tenant only has up to 2 employees maximum, and they usually only work part-time, up to 40 hours a week maximum. And then the majority of the client contact occurs at the office. So the detailed analysis of the application with the use review criteria and the applicant's full management plan is found in the memo, but in the summary, it must be made that it's consistent with the RH5 zoning district, and staff did find that it is consistent based on the fact that it provides direct service to the neighborhood. It can also increase the accessibility of some of these types of businesses to residents within the neighborhood and the surrounding residential areas. There's minimal negative impacts to the neighborhood, especially because the way it's operating now won't be changed or affected by this use review to add the personal services. And because the employees are limited and part-time, there's not a lot of traffic impact. And then there's no additional floor area or facade changes proposed to the building, so there won't be an effect to the character of the area. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the proposal as it meets the use review criteria and recommends the motion that you see on your screen.
Great. Thanks for a really good presentation. Does anyone have questions for staff? John?
Yeah, 2 questions. One, in the list of personal services that you just showed, one of the personal services categories was a bakery. And I'm just wondering at what stage that turns into a commercial operation or some other classification rather than a personal service, given the 1-hour appointment characteristics of the others.
Sure. So we have different definitions of different sorts of restaurant uses as well as commercial kitchen uses in the definition. So based on those, if they didn't meet this personal service definition or the intent of it, and they met one of those better, then they would fall out of being called a personal service use.
So I'm still trying to understand what that implies for a bakery. I mean, it's not clear to me that these offices are big enough for a bakery anyway, but just wondering about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just add that our definition of personal service uses is pretty antiquated. I mean, I don't even think everything up here is listed, but like a bicycle repair shop, bakery, I think when this was written, it was really to serve the immediate neighborhood. So it would be very rare that we would call a bakery a personal service use. Because you would have to meet the operational characteristics of only serving the neighborhood. And then I think in the middle, Gabby is trying to indicate what this use review is proposing. So if they didn't meet those operating characteristics, then they would have to go through an additional use review or it wouldn't be allowed. Did that answer your question?
So just by virtue of being listed in this list here, that in itself is not sufficient to allow a bakery to move in. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
They would have to meet the conditions of this use review rather
Okay.
than meeting the actual definition of personal service use.
All right, thank you. The other question I had was how this might affect the planning process for that area in general, given recent decisions made for the hospital and the neighboring
Yep.
area.
So it is within the Alpine Balsam area plan, but currently the analysis of the vision, goal, and objectives of the plan against this use review proposal is not necessary since the development of the property is existing and the land use map hasn't been changed for this area. So until then, they recommend it to be high-density residential. So if land use changes are made in the future, that would render this a non-conforming use. and would show preference towards the high-density residential uses. But currently, it's not affecting this proposal because there's no land use changes associated with this area.
So again, just to make sure I understand, so what's being proposed here would not have any impact on the range or opportunities or
Correct. Yes.
anything that's going on with the land use planning in the area?
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions?
I just had a clarification. So you may have changed this, but when I read through it, on page 3, it says that the property is located within the boundaries of the recently adopted Alpine Balsam Area Plan. I don't think the city actually adopted the area plan. The city adopted an area plan that was specific to the city-owned site. So I just think that recently adopted is perhaps inaccurate. That was it.
You could say vision plan.
So I can answer that question. The area plan that was adopted by the planning board and the council in this last month includes the area that is shown in the map up here by the outer dashed black line.
Okay.
Then within that area plan boundary, there was only a vision of a land use plan and land use changes for the city-owned site. So what you see on the screen here was the previous draft of the land use plan that then for the greater surrounding area plan area was removed from the final plan. The transportation connections, urban design, all of that stuff that applies for the full area plan area still applies. So the area plan was adopted with this geographic boundary, so the property is located within the boundary of the plan, but there's no implications in terms of land use.
Thank you. I really appreciate that
Yep.
clarification.
Cool. Any other questions? Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Oh, hi, I'm Sarah Remmert, and I own 954 North Street. And I don't have a presentation. Thank you so much, Gabby, for presenting it, but I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thanks very much for doing that. Does anyone have questions for Gabby?
No.
Or for, sorry,
Sarah, yes.
Sarah.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, you heard my inquiry earlier about, for example, a bakery moving in. And the response of the city was that that would require some additional permitting. So I'm trying to understand at what stage if you decided to rent one of or more of the spaces to, for example, a bakery, how does the city get involved at that point?
So the way that there's 18 offices, they're like 10 by 10 individual offices. And right now, they're almost entirely rented by therapists and social workers, those types of professionals. We have a couple of attorneys in there. And the type of businesses that would be interested in renting would be bodywork people, a skincare professional. It's all of these independently owned businesses that can accommodate one client at a time, again, just in the same capacity that a talk therapist is seeing someone. So that's the intention of expanding that so that those types of professionals can also work out of that space. So I don't have a I mean, there's not going to be a bakery in there. It's going to be.
I mean, I understand the likelihood and intention of that. I'm just trying to understand the process at which the city might
I think I could make
get involved.
I could make this easier, maybe. He really does like baked goods, so if you could just say, yes, there might be a bakery, that would be good for him.
Okay, well, Breadworks is just a block away.
Yeah, I understand.
No, I know, no, I don't know that process, but I have no intention of having anything other than what would fit in a 10 by 10 space where that, someone could see a client is essentially what that use is, and it's a very quiet office building, so you can't be having tons of people in because of the nature that the
Right.
majority of the people in there are very quiet.
Sounds like Hella has something to say.
Yes, so the approval approves any office uses that are personal service uses consistently operated with the management plan. And that describes office uses such as healing arts such as skincare, physical therapy, massage, acupuncture, yoga, audiology, homeopathy, I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, I think, type businesses. And it states 2 employees maximum per business, up to a total of 18 businesses, all clients by appointee only, no walk-in, 1 to 2 clients at a time for approximately an hour, and so forth. So it really describes a certain type of operation, and any business that goes in there has to comply with that. And if they want to change that, then they would have to come in for a new use review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions for the applicant? Great. Thanks for coming. Do we have anyone signed up to speak to us? Cool. In that case, we'll return them out of the board. Does anybody want to kick this off or make a motion, perhaps? Peter?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Going to read that?
Motion to approve land use review LUR 2019-00025, incorporating the staff memorandum and the attached analysis of use review criteria as findings of fact and subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Thanks. Do we have a second?
Sure, second.
Great. Does anyone want to speak to the motion, or should we go ahead and take a vote on this? Great. I'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Passes unanimously. Congratulations. And good luck to all the massage therapists and skincare folks out there. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is public hearing consideration of site review to redevelop a 1.6 acre property at 1665 33rd Street with a congregate care facility, case number LUR 2018-00050. So we'll start off again with a presentation by staff, questions from planning board, presentation by the applicant, opportunity for folks to speak from the public. And if you haven't signed up and you want to, sign up with Cindy, the board secretary over there. And then we'll return the matter to the board after that. So take it away, Sloan.
All right, thanks. So this item is related to a site review request for 1665 33rd Street, which is the prior Frohof's Garden Center site. The proposal is for a congregate care facility with 106 permanently affordable dwelling units and associated community amenities and services and administrative offices. The project is required to complete a site review based on the floor area proposed, and the application includes a height modification request, which requires a public hearing before planning board. So just as a quick overview for tonight's discussion, I will review the existing site conditions and the surrounding context, give a description of the site review proposal, bring up some key issues for discussion, and end with a recommendation. So as part of the public process, written notice was sent to property owners within 600 feet, and a notice has been posted on the property. There was some public comments that have been forwarded to the board. So the property is located north of Arapahoe on 33rd Street. The area contains a wide range of retail and commercial operations, industrial uses, and high-density residential uses. North on 33rd Street are various service and light industrial uses, including the RTD administrative offices and maintenance garage, the Boulder County Clerk and Recorder Building, and the City of Boulder Public Safety Facility. There's a view of those. To the south, sorry, I lost my mouse here, is a Wells Fargo bank with drive-up services and a large office building. To the west is the Sunrise Shopping Center, which contains a variety of retail, service, and restaurant uses, and King Soopers is the anchor tenant there. To the south, across Arapahoe, lies the University of Colorado East Campus and Research Labs. And Boulder Community Hospital is located approximately 3/4 of a mile to the east on Arapahoe. And I missed the photo, but the Peloton is also located directly across 33rd Street which was originally approved by the Planning Board in 2004 as a mixed-use project with 390 dwelling units and a neighborhood business center, which includes office, retail, and restaurant uses. And as part of that site and use review approval, the Peloton site was rezoned from an industrial general district to a high-density residential district. The site is currently designated as general business on the land use map of the comprehensive plan, and it's just important to note there is no maximum residential density under that designation. And the corresponding zoning is Business Residential 1, which is business centers of the Boulder Valley, which contain a wide range of retail and commercial operations, including the largest regional scale businesses, which serve the outlying residential development. The site is located just outside of the Boulder Valley Regional Center, which is defined in the comp plan as a high-intensity regional commercial center planned for a variety of uses. And although the site is located outside of the boundaries of the BVRC, the character of the area is eclectic and is representative of a regional business center. The property is located within the boundaries of the Crossroads East Sunrise Center area plan, which includes the easternmost portion of the BVRC. And for planning purposes, it includes the properties along the west side of 33rd, including this property. And this area was targeted for a specific area plan because it was identified as an area within the BVRC with significant opportunities for redevelopment. And the objectives of this plan were to enrich the area's design quality, improve vehicular circulation and the multimodal network, and upgrade the current surface parking facilities. Also important to note that a transportation connections plan for the BVRC was adopted that same year, which replaced the plan connections. And in this case, the plan includes a future 12-foot wide multi-use path on the property to the west, and also a bike lane on 33rd Street. So the site review proposal includes a congregate care facility, like I described, with 106 permanently affordable units for seniors. This includes 100 one-bedroom units and 6 two-bedroom units. Academy Senior Living would own and manage the facility. The Academy currently owns and operates a congregate care facility on the Hill and has been approved for another at 311 Mapleton. The proposed use does meet the definition of a congregate care facility, where at least 80% of the units will be occupied by at least one person who is 65 years of age and older, and the provision of common services and amenities. The proposed facility is planned to provide amenities like a common dining area in both a cafe and a restaurant, a wellness center, a fitness center, a computer room, media center. There's centralized gathering spaces and gardening opportunities. In addition to that, residents of the facility are able to attend social activities and performances at the other Academy sites. And they will also have access to optional housekeeping and linen services. In terms of the transportation demand management, they are proposing eco-passes to be provided for residents and employees. They're proposing 10 electric car sharing vehicles, a bike sharing program, and the Academy is planning to not allow residents to keep a car on site as part of the agreement, lease agreement. They're proposing a van share service to be provided as part of the larger Academy programming to shuttle residents to and from desired locations. So as part of the development, they are required to provide at least 40% of the floor area of the buildings for units that meet the requirements for permanently affordable units. However, the proposal is to provide 100% of the floor area for permanently affordable housing. There is 3 components to that, which was described in the memo. The first would be to satisfy their inclusionary housing requirement on site, which is about 26 units. They also would satisfy a portion of their inclusionary housing requirement at 311 Mapleton off-site on this site, which the number is to be determined. And then the additional 50 or so units would be in excess of those requirements. And we have someone from housing here if you have any questions about that proposal. So the site design includes 3 buildings organized around a central courtyard. 2 of the buildings are 4-story structures over podium parking, which is 5 stories total. The northern building has a 2-story portion that faces 33rd Street and is proposed to contain the kitchen facilities, restaurant, cafe, fitness room, and community rooms. This orientation is intended to create a transition in height from 33rd Street to the more intense commercial developments to the west. A full movement access is proposed on the south side of the site to the podium parking from 33rd Street, and an emergency access is proposed along the southern property line. The emergency access has been designed to accommodate a 12-foot multi-use path, which would provide a multimodal connection between 33rd and the Sunrise Center to the west. They're also dedicating 9.5 feet of right-of-way along 33rd to accommodate public improvements, which includes that 5-foot bike lane, which was planned for in the connections plan. They also have a 10-foot wide detached sidewalk, an 8-foot tree lawn, and they are providing on-street parking in that area. A sky bridge feature is proposed to span the courtyard and connect the congregate care buildings. The proposal includes usable open space in the form of that interior courtyard, the sky bridge area, a public entry plaza. Each unit will have a private balcony. They will also have a variety of interior community areas. But the open space programming is mainly focused on that interior courtyard with amenities like seating areas, a grill, patio, grill, fire pit area. And a service area is provided south of the entrance to the parking garage, which allows for deliveries, trash pickup, and a turnaround for trucks, that sort of thing. So in terms of building design, it is contemporary. The 5-story building forms, as I described, are pulled away from the street. And that building on 33rd Street is designed to enhance the pedestrian experience with storefront windows and pedestrian scale building design elements like awnings. And this building would be a combination of metal panel, wood, and glass. The 4-story structures are proposed with fiber cement board siding in both horizontal and vertical configurations, some wood siding and glass. And as I described, parking is at grade as podium parking and would be screened both from the exterior and from the courtyard by cedar fencing to sort of act as a buffer. So in terms of what changes have been made since concept plan, the planning board heard the concept plan in March of last year. And in response to feedback by staff, the planning board, council, and they also went to the design advisory board. They made some adjustments. The previous proposal was mixed use with some retail office spaces. Those have been eliminated. And now the restaurant is primarily focused on serving the congregate care use. However, it will be open to guests and members of the public. However, the main focus is on the congregate care use. The previous proposal had the full movement access point on the north side of the site. And they have moved that to the south end to align with the existing access point that serves the Peloton on the other side of the 33rd Street. And as I described, that emergency access lane has been designed to provide the multi-use path that was envisioned in the Sunrise Center area plan. The proposal now includes an entry plaza that has defined entries both to the restaurant and to the residential uses. There's also an access drive that provides a pickup and drop-off area within that plaza. The plaza has short-term bike parking, benches, landscaping. It's intended to be an active use. And then in terms of building design, in response to feedback by the Design Advisory Board, they did some revisions to the east facade of the building to improve those human scale elements. They also refined the design to give a lighter appearance to the balconies, and they revised the application of the building materials to refine the hierarchy and rhythm of the buildings. So the key issues that were identified by staff is whether the proposal meets the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, whether it meets the site review criteria, whether the proposal is consistent with the Crossroads East Sunrise Center area plan, and lastly, whether the height modification meets the site review criteria. So in terms of the comprehensive plan, the proposed uses are consistent with that general business land use designation. Housing is listed as a use to be encouraged within general business, compatible with the surrounding business character. In addition, it is, as listed in the memo, it's consistent with a number of goals and policies, particularly housing-related policies. In general, the project provides permanently affordable housing, which supports socioeconomic diversity, a compact development pattern, and housing for a full range of households. Staff finds that the site is ideal for congregate care use since it is easily accessible to a variety of services, retail, dining, entertainment uses. It's well served by transit. It does have easy access to the larger multimodal network, and as I noted, the community hospital is only 3/4 of a mile to the east. I would just add that other recent development review projects have indicated that senior housing is sorely needed in the community and allows for community members to age in place. And this proposal does help meet that need with 1 and 2 bedroom options, which is sort of unique. In terms of the site review criteria, staff does find that the project meets the site review criteria. The project is compatible, contextual, and includes the provision of high-quality housing. It does qualify as an infill development that is sensitive to the surrounding development. The open space is arranged to be accessible and functional. They're appropriate. The open spaces are appropriate for both passive and active uses. Safe and convenient connections are provided, which support that multimodal network. The staff finds that the travel demand management techniques do reduce the reliance on vehicles, and staff finds that the amount of parking is appropriate given the population served in the development and the submitted parking management plan. And I would just note the application does include a floor area ratio increase for the buildings, which is permitted in the BR1 zoning districts through the site review process. In order to obtain that increase, they have to exceed the required open space by at least 10%, and the street front facades have to be designed at a pedestrian scale, and staff finds that they meet that criteria. So as I described, they are subject to the Sunrise Center area plan. The plan contains specific urban design guidelines, which were mainly intended to correct strip mall style development, which is what this is intending to show, and to correct large expanses of surface parking. So staff finds that the proposal meets those design objectives by promoting a human scale building forward design and minimizing that surface parking. It is providing that pedestrian connection, which was planned for. We find that the proposed interior courtyard meets that intent of a plaza objective, which is described in the plan. And then in terms of heights, as I described, they are requesting a height modification. Since the buildings are connected by a sky bridge, they are considered one building for the purposes of calculating building height. So the total structure is proposed to be at 54.7 feet in height. It is eligible for a height modification because 100% of the floor area of the buildings over 35 feet are for permanently affordable housing. And that allowance for height modifications for affordable housing was intended to encourage the development of affordable housing to meet our housing goals. So contextually, there are several large-scale buildings in the vicinity, particularly within the Peloton development, which was approved to be up to 55 feet tall. However, I will note the surrounding built context is eclectic, and there is really a range from 20 feet to 40 feet aside from the Peloton. And I would just note when the Peloton development was approved, it was noted that these properties west of Foothills and south of Pearl were very appropriately placed to ask for height modifications and support future development of taller buildings. The BVRC to the west contains some of the most intense development in the city, and this development could act as a transition between that intense commercial district and the Peloton and office service uses to the east. So staff finds the proposal does meet the site review criteria concerning building design and compatibility. It is organized so that that two-story building faces 33rd Street with a transition in height to those more intense developments. It is articulated with varying forms and building materials to lower that perceived height and mass. And the site is programmed to provide that high-quality open space for the residents. So to wrap up, staff finds the proposal is consistent with the site review criteria and recommends that the board adopt the motion listed in the memo and on the screen. And as always, I'm happy to answer questions.
Great. Thanks very much, Sloan. Nice job. Does anyone have questions for staff on this?
I'll wait until we've done public.
Okay, great. Then we'll go ahead and hear a presentation from the applicant.
While we're, oh, yeah, I'll grab that. While we're unlocking the computer, we were told that there's some questions or some interest in understanding the congregate care and how that management's going to work. So we were going to ask for a few extra minutes so that we could have Gary from the Academy explain how that'll work. The presentation's only 8 or 9 minutes, but maybe another 3 or 4 for Gary would do it if that's okay with the board.
Yeah, that sounds fine with me. Does anyone have a problem with that?
No.
Okay, great. Thanks for asking.
Cousin Bill.
Start us off.
Can't see it.
Okay. Gary Berg, I'm with the Academy in Boulder, and I was asked to speak for a little bit about congregate care. Technically, your code says that we need to provide social services for residents, including at least 3 of the following: meal services, transportation, housekeeping, linen, and organized social activities. I'm expecting that we'll offer all 5. We certainly will offer 3, and I would imagine at least 4, but I would expect all 5. What that will look like, I've got some pretty good ideas, but it will depend upon what the focus groups we have with the future residents will look like. Meal services, we do view the dining opportunity here to be critical to distinguishing this community for a number of reasons. It is in a fairly densely populated area. Our primary focus will be residents, but we really want to open that restaurant up to the people that live and work in the area in hopes of promoting intergenerational connectivity for our elders with those that live and work in the area. While the bottom level, main ground level of the restaurant will be open generally to the public as well, we'll also have a side dining area for those residents that maybe aren't feeling so great that day and really don't want to be in a public space. Our transportation, we're going to have an electric car sharing program, which will be pretty unique. We also will have a driver. We'll be sharing transportation opportunities with the Academy on University Hill, Academy Mapleton Hill, and our Bella Vista Memory Care community. So I think there's some great synergies there. And basically, we're going to do the best job we can to create what I think is Boulder's first permanently affordable full-service retirement community since Golden West came on the scene. And I might add, I've got statistics later if you want to see them in terms of what Sloan was referring to in terms of our community's need for additional senior housing in the years to come.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just chime in a little bit. This is a management thing. So this is how the parking works. That was one of the questions. So residents of this community are not allowed to have cars. They will share a car fleet. So those 9 green spaces down there are the electric car fleet. It's available to anybody to use, for anyone to use who lives here. But that's really the key to allow this to be car-free. Then we have restaurant spaces. So we are meeting the code requirement for restaurant spaces. These probably also double as visitor spaces because a lot of the restaurant people coming from outside of the community or visiting someone who lives here. So they would come, park, meet their grandfather, grandmother, or mom and dad, and have dinner. And then employee parking is in purple, and visitor parking, just general visitor parking in blue. But that gives you a sense of how it works. Really, the key is to make this car-free for the residents. And if you have more questions about that, of course, we can go into it. Then briefly, and Sloan did a wonderful job, so I don't have a whole lot more to talk about. But just to recap how we got here, the blue is what's allowed under the code. So this is the FAR from setback to setback at 55 feet tall if you do a 100% affordable project under the zoning and the area plan. But then we start to erode it for what makes sense both for this program and the community. So first, drive a courtyard through the middle of it. We want to shrink the building's width down to 65, 70 feet wide, which is ideal for daylighting. It's good for sustainability. It allows us to have a protected courtyard for the seniors so that they can recreate in a place that is safe. And then we want to erode the street. So there's a couple ways to look at this. Yes, there is a 55-foot tall, very large building across the street, but 33rd Street is going to redevelop over time. So we felt it made the most sense from a pedestrian standpoint to drop the scale way down there rather than letting 55 feet match the building across the street and just do 2 stories. And that would inform 33rd as it continues to develop north and south as contemplated under the area plan to continue to be a pedestrian street first. And then parking is part of that, right? So we don't want parking up at the street. The parking is tucked back, as you've seen, underneath the building. So it's a 4-story building with kind of a minimal parking depth below that. And then a continued erosion of the southern side, both on the east and west, to drive down the perceived scale and also to allow light and some sort of permeability into the courtyard in the middle. So the final form ends up looking like that, with the more public spaces in dark blue and the residential spaces in the lighter blue. So quickly, as Sloan mentioned, program-wise, in yellow is the public space, so that's the restaurant. There's a 1st and 2nd floor to it. The entry to the facility is in green, and green on these maps, on these plans, refers to as essentially as programming space. So as you go up through the building, that 2nd floor of the restaurant is still open to the public. That might also be the spot, as Gary mentioned, sometimes in senior housing, you're not having a day where you want to eat with the public. So perhaps this is the more private area of the restaurant for folks that are just wanting to get some food, but still want to get out of their rooms to do so. The green is the community programming space, so that would be exercise, for example, on the right side, on the upper right corner. There's also yoga rooms and craft rooms and places for music and other programming. And that programming may not be available only to these residents. What the Academy is contemplating is that they have a van share that drives, as Sloan mentioned, between the facilities. So if there's something going on here, if there's a concert here, or if there's one of the conversations has been with, can we have like a community health kind of seminar or something like that? Perhaps 311 Mapleton or Academy on the Hill would want to attend that. They can come to that, and vice versa. These folks can go to programming events in the other places. And then moving up, the treehouse as a community room, a little bit of a gathering space on the upper left. So that's how the programming works. Moving into the design changes, a little more detail on what Sloan mentioned. Originally, we had the entry to the north, and it was pointed out both in our community meetings and by planning board, good points, that first of all, it didn't align well with the roads on the other side of the street. And second of all, with this kind of direct in access, there's not really a good drop-off scenario. You have to drop off at the curb. And with a car fleet and no private cars, there should be a lot of pickups and drop-offs from Uber, vans, that kind of thing. Also drop-offs from visitors. If there's the unfortunate occurrence of medical attention or emergency response, they block the entry. So that was a really good set of concerns. So by flipping it, we've moved the entrance to the south, but we also did a couple things. So the first is the checkerboard provides places to stop. So the non-checkerboard is direct in and out. The checkerboard on the southern side is a place for delivery, so you could drop off linen. It could be a place where the van parks, that kind of just service stuff. The top part, just to the north of that little circle of landscaping in the middle, is actually, there's a circle drive there. So that circle drive allows an ambulance to come in, it allows a drop-off to come in, Uber or Lyft, deliveries, without blocking the access. So in that way, we're reducing the traffic load on the street. So good comments, and we picked all those up. The second was in an effort to, sometimes we get carried away, to try to really push on the pedestrian scale and make this really finely detailed at the street. We got a little carried away with the number of materials. So planning board rightly pointed that out, also a follow-up at DDAB. So we have a simplified material palette. So it's really two main materials, a lot of focus on the composite wood because it has that warmth feeling, which is a nice thing to have in the senior housing, and then steel detailing, some nice kind of detailing moves, and we'll see more of the building later. Then the connection to Sunrise Shopping Center came up. There is supposed to be a bike path on the Sunrise Shopping Center directly to the west on the, I think it's the King Soopers there, the grocery store. But that will go in someday. The question is, can we preserve an access to that point when it goes in? And in the meantime, people are kind of cutting through there. Can we provide a better way for them to do that? In the original plan, the entry was on the north, our cut-through was on the south, and it wasn't even a cut-through, it was an emergency access, so it wasn't designed as a pedestrian way. So again, really good comments. We flipped that, a little bit obscured by the trees that are in place here. But by moving on the plan on the bottom, by moving the entry to the south and redesigning that emergency access, that fire access, is actually, it's a pedestrian access, it's a bike path. So while it doesn't connect officially to the shopping center to the west, it can. If people choose to cut through, they have a much nicer way to cut through. And when that planned bike path goes in on the far east side of that property to the west, up against our property, there's a direct tie-in that's already in place. So again, good suggestion and a major improvement to the project. Okay, then we went to DAB, and I think Brian, you may have been on that as a representative of Planning Board. Again, a very good working session that we appreciate. And so there was a bunch of things suggested. One was in an effort to simplify the building to eliminate that brick colonnade across the front. We just really had the horizontal awnings at the entry to the restaurant, so to carry that through to, again, create more pedestrian interest and scale. There was a lot of questions about the fenestration. We had more fenestration where you don't enter and less where you do, so that was suggested to flip. There was very little permeability between the entry and the courtyard. That was on purpose in this one. We're very, very sensitive to the safety of the seniors and the perceived safety of the seniors. It needs to be a protected space. But there wasn't any visual penetration except for through the restaurant. So that was a concern that DAB had and Planning Board shared. Actually, Council shared it too when we went to that concept plan. So we have made changes to that, which I'll show you. And then windows is a different way to express the windows across the facade. So again, here are the changes that we came up with. So a much simplified design, a little more contemporary. Gary has mentioned that what he wanted this to be designed for, what they're finding best practices for seniors, to design it as someplace that anyone would want to live, multi-generational, not as something that screams senior housing. So it's trying to be hip, actually, because they find that that's a better quality of life indicator for the seniors. And as we spin around, so this is looking from the south, you can see that the edge of the restaurant is the edge of that wood piece that goes vertical, and this building to the left is the entry. So there's a much more permeable view corridor. So if you come to go into the restaurant, you have a 30-foot wide, 20-foot wide view corridor into the courtyard. So we do have to gate that, because again, it has to be safe, but it's a permeable gate. So it's just a metal gate that you can see through, so there's a tie-in between the two. And then again, the simplified materials. Lastly, there was some, well, we've been spending a lot of time designing the courtyard. That's the open space. And this is where the seniors spend a lot of time. So there's been a lot of talk about the programming. We can talk about that. But, there needs to be a place for people that want to stay out of the sun to stay out of the sun, a place for people to walk. There needs to be vegetation, flowers, planting. And then the treehouse was really designed as a way for those folks that maybe couldn't move outside or didn't want to, or it was too cold or too rainy certain parts of the day and they just can't, to have a connection to what's going on. So it's sort of like the Overlook, right? It's the place you can go up in the treehouse and look down and be connected to your friends and see how they're working out in the space. And then also that's a programmable space. So there's events there that could be little talks or gaming or music or whatever. So that's the presentation. I'm sure there's questions and we're happy to answer them. Thank you for the extra time.
Great, thanks very much. Any questions for the applicant? No. John, you go on.
Yeah, a couple. One is a sort of a management type question. And thanks, Mr. Berg, for your comments. Oh, sorry. So you mentioned the Academy Group is going to own and operate this facility. What is the Rubicon Group that I see on the plans here? Is there some connection between the two, or?
The Academy Group, my partners will own one half of this project, and the other half is owned by a number of other individuals, all from Boulder.
I see, but it will be the Academy Group that is the management.
Right. We're the ones that are deemed to have some expertise in this area, so they are handing the keys to us and telling us not to crash the car.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then I had a question also regarding the design, and that is, you mentioned that there will be the multi-use path going on the south side, which seems great to me. But is there to be a north-south multi-use path eventually on the west side of the property? And if so, where will that be?
Yep, let me pull up a plan here. It's a good question. Okay, so there's two things that are called for in the Sunrise Community Plan. Sloan, please stop me if I speak incorrectly here. But on the east side of the property to the west, so not on this property, but on essentially in the loading dock area of the grocery store, there's identified a multi-use path that runs north-south. So clearly, it would take a redevelopment of that parcel, but we don't want to eliminate a connection to that future north-south path from everything to the east. So we've connected to the point where that property would then redevelop and where the TMP would require them to put in that plan. Then on, get this right, on the west side of 33rd, there is in place as part of this, well, I'm sorry, it's in place now, as part of this would be to enhance that at the curb, a north-south bike path as part of the street. So there's those kind of dual paths.
Right. So I guess I just want to confirm that maybe it's a question to staff, that north-south bike path in the back of King Soopers, it's clear that will be on the King Super, on that shopping center property, or is there some expectation that half of that would be on this property in some way?
Right. I know we did a lot of research into that. It's actually on the BVRC Transportation Connection Plan, and that is the expectation, is that it would be fully accommodated on the neighboring property, and that is how it appears that it was planned. So this site was planned to provide that bike lane, and the property to the west would provide that north-south multi-use path.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sarah?
I actually have a question about the programming, not so much about the building. So I wanted to look up I was curious about rent control, and since this is going to be permanently affordable, and I pulled up the city document about rent control. It's like 400 pages, so I did not have time to read that. But I'm just curious if you could give us a thumbnail of how you, what's the criteria other than not making more than 60% of AMI and being, I think it was 65 or older. How do you make sure that you are able to accommodate both retirees who may not make 60% of AMI but have wealth, and retirees who also make less than 60% of AMI and don't have wealth? I'm just sort of curious how you're going to manage that.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but let me start by just saying that, in essence, you could look at this as any other affordable rental property within Boulder. The difference, in my mind, is we've got congregate care, so we have to have one member in each household that's at least 65 years of age. There's an exception for a certain percentage of residences, but that's really the difference maker. The rent will still be set, the ceilings on the rent will still be set by the city, Michelle Allen and her team, and so we have to comply with that. Okay. Our other services will be offered. They'll be a la carte. It's hard enough to make one of these projects work, as you know, from just providing the housing to throw the food and everything else in there for that ceiling of rent isn't financially viable, but I'm confident that with our knowledge that we've learned over the years, that we'll be able to provide really great food for a fair price. And we've found that that's super important because it's the key part of community building and connectivity amongst the residents, and like I say, also hopefully with intergenerational connectivity as well. So my big picture answer is, think of it as your typical affordable rental community, and then we layer on the services on top of that, hopefully as efficiently as possible.
Before you get up, just let me ask one
So I'm not
question.
sure I answered your question,
No,
but I tried.
you kind of did, and I think Michelle's going to answer it more deeply. But so I'm just thinking about, for residents who choose not to use your linen service, are there going to be washing machine? I know this is very specific, but are there going to be those kinds of support elements that someone might need?
I'm pretty sure every residence has a washer dryer, correct?
I'm not sure we got to.
Just a.
Always forget about the microphone. So, yeah, at site review, we haven't finished all the details, but, the idea would be, yes, if somebody doesn't use the linen service, they need to be able to, take care of their own clothes. Right. Just like they would have their own kitchen in case, if they're not eating at the dining hall.
Right, okay.
Right, so actually, that's a good point. Michelle can speak to this too. Thank you. So since it's a 100% affordable project, it has to meet all the affordable livability standards, so all the protections that are normally in that for rental units.
Okay, thank you.
Place.
Is that enough, Sarah? Do you want to hear more from Michelle?
Well,
I just wanted to make a quick comment about how we income qualify seniors, because I think that was the gist of your question. Mm-hmm. So when people are working, they're income qualified through their income. They have a paycheck. Seniors are income qualified differently, and there are some considerations for them to have higher assets than working people. Mm-hmm. So it's all in the program, and seniors are not so much income qualified, but they have asset limits, so.
Okay, that's
that
very
makes
helpful.
sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Great. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Do we have anyone signed up to speak from the public? I see we have our staff runner here today. That's good. Okay, so far we've got 2 folks signed up. And for those of you who know the routine, you come up and you speak at the podium. You have 3 minutes. There's a light set up there. Green means go. Yellow means you should be starting to land the plane, and red means you're done, or you've crashed the plane. So the first person is, I think, Martha Railson. Sorry if I'm getting your name wrong. The next one is Joan Lutz.
Hello, I'm Martha Paulson, and I live at the Peloton, 3601 Arapahoe Avenue, number 117. I'm here to talk about something that a lot of the residents at the Peloton have a concern about, and that is the increased traffic in the area. We've expressed these concerns at city meetings, at private meetings with the developers, et cetera, a number of times. I think that you've received some letters from a couple of our board members concerning this also. And one of the board members, in his letter, his name is Ted Noyes, he's the president of the Peloton Homeowners Association, referenced, I believe, a city study that indicated that 33rd Street will have an increase of approximately 1,000 cars a day. We've talked about the Ubers and that kind of stuff coming through. So in general, I believe most of the residents at the Peloton are very supportive of this idea and of the project and the design, et cetera. But the traffic is something that has been a concern. So what I'm asking for is support and direction for an idea that I believe may alleviate some of the congestion and add to the safety of the area. And it's actually a project that I've promoted to a number of different departments with the city, transportation and advisory boards, and et cetera, et cetera. And it actually occurs, the idea is on the Transportation Department Master Plan of October 24th, 2002, Superblock 7 detail, where they actually suggest formalizing Canyon Boulevard from 30th to 33rd. And I think that adding another artery would help greatly with the traffic in this area. So it's actually on this city document from 2002. So I've gone to the owners of the properties, I've gone to Peloton residents, one of our representatives have gone to the chief of police, et cetera, and we have generally positive input. So I'm just not sure how to carry it forward. I was working with a couple of the people that were involved with the Transportation Master Plan to try to get it this idea to move forward onto that, but spinning my wheels. So I wanted to make you aware that this might be something that will help make this project a lot friendlier in the area, because as you know, there are municipal buildings, et cetera, that get a lot of traffic. So what do I do? How do I move forward? I think that this is a good idea, and the city apparently thought it was a good idea in 2002.
Great. Thanks, Martha. So I'm going to, since you've asked a question, and I want to try to indulge that a little bit, since we don't have 1,000 people speaking.
Yes.
We don't have any purview over that in terms of this site plan review, and I think you already understand that. But what we could do is if somebody's interested in making a motion after this site review, we could make a motion regarding this if you want to. And also we'll just all put it in our minds for when we review the next transportation master plan. But that's sort of like our touch points with that are, can we communicate something outside of this review to someone else? And then when those documents come in front of us, we can weigh in on that. So thanks for advocating for stuff you care about.
Thank you.
Joan Lutz, you're up next. And if anyone else wants to speak, this is the time to sign up.
Hello, thank you, board members. My name is Joan Lutz. I live at the Peloton. I'm a registered landscape architect, registered nurse working in geriatrics, and an inactive attorney. I am concerned about the lack of stormwater detention on the site. I realize the developer is matching the existing impervious conditions at Fruehof's, but with climate change and the likelihood of more extreme flooding events in the future, there should be greater effort to retain and treat stormwater on every site undergoing development or redevelopment. Underground storage structures could be used, i.e. underground pipes or vaults to store stormwater and then slowly release it. Also, the stormwater quality measures are woefully undersized. Again, this could be accomplished underground. In Montgomery County, Maryland, where I worked as a planner, you never designed a parking lot without including an oil, trash, and grit separator. This Fruehof site drains almost directly to Boulder Creek, where people fish. Also, vehicular access, although greatly improved from last time, is a problem. Large turnarounds are an aspect of other senior places in Boulder, such as at Morningstar, which has a 100-foot diameter turnaround, if you include the sidewalk, far larger than what is shown on this site plan. Also, Morningstar, for example, and many of the others have a driveway, a longer driveway in between the turnaround at the front entry and the street, which allows for stacking of vehicles. Older people can take a long time to exit a car, and it's likely that longer buses or ambulances or delivery vehicles will end up backing onto busy 33rd Street with the bike lane and the turning lane onto Arapahoe. There's really not that much room for parking. Plus, I think there's a fire hydrant there. Anyway, finally, I'm glad there's now a pedestrian link between the east and west sides of this development, and hope you'll show how people will be able to climb up the existing retaining wall there. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So no one else? Great. We'll return them out of the board. I'm going to see if a couple things. One is David asked me recently to restore our practice of letting people know in advance before they're going to get called on to go first. So I was thinking if we were to just, for each of the key issues, kind of start at one end, and then we'll maybe start with one person, then stagger to the next person each time, if that sounds fair. So consider yourselves warned. But before we get to the key issues, I was thinking maybe we should each just provide our overall feedback, unless you guys want to do it under the BVCP key issue item. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. Do that.
Okay, since people are lukewarm on that, why don't we just kick it off with key issue number one, which is the BVCP, which is pretty much a general impression kind of category anyways. So Sarah, following through on my threat to calling you first, is that okay?
Yes, and I'm going to pass.
Okay, great. Harmon, you're next.
Well, I think the goals and policies that are cited in the staff report that are particular items that the project does satisfy are in the record. I personally, in my view, think that the project meets the goals of the comprehensive plan, particularly in that it provides a lot of affordable senior housing, which was one of the major community benefits that we were looking to satisfy in the comprehensive plan update. So on balance, the project does meet the goals and policies.
Great, I'll call on myself next. Yeah, I do think it meets the goals of the comp plan exactly as staff laid out. I do want to highlight a couple of things. I think it's a few years ago that we suggested that another project attempt a car-free or car ownership-free model like this, and we were laughed down. And I think it's fantastic to see this finally coming about. I think it's a pretty groundbreaking project. I think it's going to open people's eyes quite a bit to what's possible out there. I really appreciate the move to go to 100% affordable housing. And in terms of process, I think this is one where, you know, the original concept review came in at a certain level, baked to a certain level. The feedback that staff gave and DAB gave and planning board gave actually did make the project better all the way through the process. And I think we've got a project that looks really great now. So I'm actually really maybe uncharacteristically psyched with our process. Could have been maybe faster. So I'll pass along to Peter.
I echo what you said, and I do agree that it meets the plans, and obviously the permanently affordable housing, socioeconomic diversity, and I really like the treehouse. I think it's great, and I think a lot of grandkids are going to enjoy it.
Cool. John?
Yes, I think this does meet the goals and policies of the comp plan.
Great. Sarah, do you want to take a bite at that apple, or do you want to wait? Okay, great. So key issue number 2 is site review criteria, which I know everyone's got memorized. So Harmon, do you want to kick us off on you? You actually wind up going first twice.
Yeah,
sorry.
Okay, that's all right. So yeah, I find that the project meets the site review criteria that apply to it. And this is probably besides, since height is just its own key issue in 4. There are a bunch of other site modifications that were talked about that I think the project also justifies. You know, initially I was a little alarmed by the reduction in the front setback on 33rd Street to 4 feet, but I think that's really driven by the fact that the applicant's dedicating almost 10 feet of right-of-way to the public. So, effectively, it's more like a 13.5-foot front setback or even greater because of the building overhang. So just, in general, it meets the site review criteria, and I support that.
Great. I'll be brief and just say I agree with what you said. Peter?
I concur with what you both said.
In general, I concur also, but I remain concerned about that north-south intended bike path or multi-use path. And staff indicated that that's likely to be on the King Soopers property. I'm just wondering if the King Soopers owner agrees that that's the case also. And maybe Hella, you can give some legal comment on whether that is the case or whether we need to be concerned about that with respect to making sure we don't eliminate the possibility of a north-south path because we're assuming something that not everybody agrees to.
I didn't look at the plan in terms of where it exactly is shown on the plan, but if this project is developed without that plan connection, then of course it can't be exacted from this project anymore because it's already approved at that point in time. I think Sloan is very familiar with the plan itself.
So I can't speak to this in detail, but I know that transportation staff did a lot of research into this adopted plan and looked at what the intent was and what the alignment was. If you look north-south where it would be most feasible, and I think it was intended to break that block. So if this neighboring property were to develop, I think that if they went through a discretionary process, we would ask them for that multi-use path connection.
So you don't see that as a concern with what we're dealing with right now?
No, I don't. And I think they have a little bit of buffer on this property if they needed to use part of their property to use the shoulder or whatnot. I think that this has been planned for, and we have determined that it would be exacted by the neighboring property.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I agree with you on the site plan.
Great, thanks. Good questions, though, too. Sarah?
Nothing to say.
Okay, great. So next key issue is compatibility with the character established in the Crossroads East and Sunrise Center area plans. I guess I'll kick myself off on that one. I think it does. I think it's an eclectic area, and I think being familiar with area plans around there, they're sort of calling for a different kind of urbanism that's there now, and I think this leans in the right direction. And I do appreciate the fact that this building sort of takes a knee on the 33rd elevation to have a lower street frontage than Peloton does across from it. I think it's a good urban design move for the future. So that's all I'll say on that, but generally, yes.
When I look at the building to the north, the auto store and the thrift store, I do kind of wish this looked a little more like that, but it doesn't. I think it's fascinating. I think it's great. I think it looks better than it did when we first saw it, and I don't remember it looking bad before. I think it looks really nice.
It was horrible. Dad fixed it for him. It's great. John?
I think this is compatible with the neighborhood character. I do have a concern that if the buildings to the north and to the south get redeveloped and to the maximum potential, that a lot of the very attractive character of this building may disappear because the views from the north-facing and south-facing windows may disappear. But I'm not sure how to. I'm not sure it's appropriate to try to address that concern here, but it is a concern that's crossing my mind. Beyond that, I think it's compatible with the neighborhood character.
Great. Cool. Sarah?
I agree.
Cool. Armin?
I agree as well. And I think, with some of the comments about there being too much busyness in the concept plan, I like the concept plan. I like the final plan even better. And I think it really is an attractive design. So, like the use of the wood. The manufactured wood's pretty cool looking. It's kind of warm, and so just kudos on that.
Yeah, last comment on that for me is I think the design really hangs together well. The composition is fantastic now, so I think it's really good, and not only because of Dav's comments. Peter, do you want to kick us off on the last key issue, which is the height modification?
So nobody wants anything tall, and I get that, but we have a plan in place to encourage what we want, and what we want is affordable dwellings, and that's what we're getting. So I'm okay with it.
John?
I think it meets the site review criteria.
Great. Sarah?
So I also feel it meets the site review criteria, but I do have a question that I'd like to put on the table. Sure. I was confused by what seemed to be some indeterminate number of units. There just seemed to be when I read through the material, there was on page 293, there was this comment about the proposed off-site affordable units do not meet the size requirements to be considered a one-to-one equivalency. And then on page 14, under table 8.1, there was a calculation of density. So I'm a bit confused by the issue of equivalency, and would really like to have someone explain that to me.
Thanks, Michelle.
So it's a bit academic, actually. Okay. So I would just start out by saying, reminding you what I think you already know, which is that inclusionary housing is not a site review criteria, but we'd just like you to know what the plans are. Mm-hmm. And so the units at 311 Mapleton are bigger. They're by and large 2-bedroom units. And we haven't yet exactly determined what would be on 311 from the perspective of size, even unit numbers, although we have definitely talked about 8 units there. And so the remainder of the units required for 311 will be met on this site. But again, it's a bit academic because they're going so far over and above what they're required to do. But it wouldn't be one-to-one because you can't, inclusionary housing does require that the units be the same. Okay. So it's probably not 2-to-1, it's probably something shy of that. Okay. And I think that my first round of calculations that I did said that we would count 35 of these units for 311 Mapleton. But again, they've got another 50 units to spare, so.
So this number of approximately 100 plus is somewhere in the vicinity of the actual number of I know dwelling units has a specific term, but the actual number of units that will be livable on this site? I'm trying to understand the actual number versus,
right.
versus
so
the form.
Inclusionary requirement comes to give or take 50 units. Okay. They've got 106 units affordable. You know, the letter of the law inclusionary requirement is they have to meet the requirements for their own site, 26, and then whatever we determine for 311, which is in that, I don't know, you know, it's 30, 35, something like that. Okay. And all the remainder are gravy, and it's very generous of them to be doing those on top of the inclusionary requirement. So we appreciate that, but it's just not, for the documentation purposes, going to be a one-to-one.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Michelle. It's good to have a housing wonk in the audience. Harmon.
So we're on 4, right? Height?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, just the unit thing threw me off. So the criterion states the building height, mass scale, orientation, architecture, and configuration are compatible with the existing character of the area or the character established by adopted design guidelines or plans for the area. So I would say it's a eclectic area, but a lot of it is dominated by Peloton at 55 feet, so I think you can say that it meets that modification request criterion. And, I was thinking about nitpicking a little bit because the northeast corner is where the low point is, and because the Sky Bridge probably the highest point on the building that's as far away from the northeast corner as can be, is being unfairly tagged as being taller than it would be if there was no sky bridge, but it's a pretty level area, and I bet it's probably only a foot or two. It's a tall building, and that's okay. It meets the criteria, and I think it's worthy of approval.
Cool. Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is why we've got the regulations we've got, so we've asked for it and we're getting it. That takes us through all 4 key issues. Does anyone want to raise another or add to this or make a motion? John?
I have one comment, and I agree. We've gone through all of these, and it looks like there wasn't a lot of dispute on that. But I have to say that the view of the west building from Arapahoe has, in my opinion, a very undesirable characteristic of a solid windowless wall that makes it fortress-like or prison-like, and I think that's due to the staircase on the south end of that building. And I think if there were windows in that staircase, it would make the building much more attractive when viewed from Arapahoe. And it might lighten up the staircase also. I don't know about the practical aspects or the economics of that, but I think it really is, from that angle, not very attractive. The west building viewed from Arapahoe, yes.
Okay. So if you want to look at SR 1.13 site elevations.
Yes, you can see on the south site elevation there.
May I?
Bill, please. Yep.
So really briefly, good catch. I didn't think about that. That was a remnant from when we thought we needed to have these as 2 buildings, because what Harmon identified with the site, with the height of the buildings, when they tie them together, it becomes a little more restrictive. We figured out how to get the building underneath that height, even with them tied together. Since they are now 1 building, we can put windows in the stairwell. Before, the problem was the stairwell was too close to the other building for building code. So I can't promise it without talking to the building code guys, but I think it's highly likely that we can get some windows in there.
I think that would make this a much more attractive project.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Aesthetically.
Appreciate it.
Good comment, John. That seems like that would fall in the minor mod at best category.
Probably not a controversial one either.
Yeah. Peter?
I'll make a motion.
Language up there. Got it? Yep, there it is. It's on the screen now.
Same. Make a motion to approve site review case number LUR 2018-00050, incorporating the staff memorandum and the attached site review criteria checklist as findings of fact and subject to the conditions of approval recommended in the staff memorandum.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, great. So moved by Peter, seconded by John. Does anyone want to speak to the motion? Or should we take a vote on that? Okay.
Did we want to offer an amendment that spoke to the public's comment about opening up Canyon?
That would be a second motion after this issue, yeah. Okay, hearing no desire for further conversation, let's go ahead and call the question. All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Okay, great, passes unanimously. Thank you, guys. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, let staff reset. We can stretch their legs a little bit.
Bill, did you want these back?
Yeah, I think, yeah. Okay, we're ready. Okay, welcome back. So we have one last item on our public hearing agenda for the night, and that is to adopt, or to recommend to City Council to adopt the new building and energy codes for the City of Boulder. So,
thank you, and good evening, Board. Will Birchfield, Chief Building Official for the city.
Your mic on, Will?
Pardon?
got it.
Oh, you got it, thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Board. With me this evening is Kristen Whitco, our Energy Code Coordinator, Kara Mertz, our Sustainability Manager, and Chief Fire Marshal David Lowry. They're all here to answer any questions on specific topics if this Board should have them. And staff is prepared to answer questions as we go or at the end, whatever is your preference. And while the focus this evening is on the adoption of the 2018 International Building Codes and the 2020 City of Boulder Energy Conservation Code, we are also proposing some amendments to other sections in Title 10 of the BRC. So we just wanted to make sure that that was clear, that it's not just to the codes themselves, it's to all of Title 10 while we were in there. And most of the amendments that we're proposing are housekeeping. We have to change the additions of the codes. We're proposing to move from the 2012 additions to the 2018. We also have to update some of the sections and references of the code as they've changed. They've moved them in additions. And some of the standards that are referenced in our codes have changed, and so we've had to change sections in our building codes to line up with those. So, and an example of those are the accessibility standard that's in the building code. For example, the building code tells us when we have to provide accessibility in buildings, but there's a separate standard that's referenced in the code that tells us what that accessibility looks like. So as they change references in those standards, we have to go back and line them up. One of the major issues that needs to be brought to the forefront is that staff has engaged the public on at least 10 separate occasions. Kristen has engaged the public at least 5 times on the energy code, and I've engaged them at least 5 times in meetings on specific building codes. And it was interesting that during those meetings, when we identified the significant changes for the new codes, there was very little negative feedback on the changes in the codes. There was more feedback about existing codes and the impacts that we're currently having. So some of the amendments that we're going to be talking about this evening are in response to the feedback that we got from the public. One of them is in response to feedback we got from this board the last time we met, and one of them is in response to direction from City Council, and a few of them are coming from staff. One of the most significant changes that will take place in the adoption of the 2018 codes is staff is proposing the adoption of the International Existing Building Code. The city has never previously adopted this code, even though it's been published since 2003. Provisions for existing buildings have been contained within Chapter 34 of the Building Code until the 2015 edition. At that time, they were deleted from the Building Code. So if a jurisdiction wants to have provisions specifically for existing buildings, we must now adopt the existing building code to do that. And so staff is recommending that. And the existing building code is a very good code. I've used it for about 15 years. It's much easier to understand. And in addition to the provisions that were in the building code, there are 2 other compliance paths offered in the existing building code for designers and property owners to use. So there's more flexibility with this code. And this code will govern all things related to construction in existing buildings. And it identifies 5 different scopes of work: repairs, alterations, change of occupancy, additions, and relocations of existing buildings. And so it's very exact and a very clear code to understand. It also has provisions for historic buildings in Chapter 12, and staff has been in communicated with, building staff has been in communication with landmark staff to make sure that our regulations are compatible with one another, that our codes don't come into conflict. One of the things that staff is recommending with the adoption of the existing building code is to tweak the definition of repairs so that it would apply to damaged buildings that are damaged by unplanned events such as floods, fires, water leaks, and so forth. And the reason for that is because in the code, it allows repairs to be done with like-for-like materials, and it doesn't necessarily require upgrades in the code, additional upgrades other than the work that's being done. So it does provide some flexibility and some leniency. So staff is recommending that we use that definition for a specific case, because if it's not a repair, then current code requirements have to be met. And of course, the like-for-like wouldn't apply for things like asbestos or our local restrictions on wood roofs and things like that. If we have specific things that are prohibited, then it would not allow those like-for-like. The existing building code also has provisions for moved buildings that are moved either within the jurisdiction or brought in from other jurisdictions, and it could be either a vertical or a horizontal movement. And it's possible, and this picture is an example, this image is an example of where a structure could actually trigger compliance with all 5 scopes of work in the existing building code. It could be a moved building, it could be an historic building, it could have to go through repairs, it could even have some alterations, it could go through a change of occupancy, or they could even add on to it. And so all of those different requirements would come into play. Chapter 6 is a very unique chapter in the existing building code, and it does an overview of what's known as the work area method. It's one of 3 methods of compliance that the existing building code provides for designers to choose from. And in this chapter, it defines different classifications of alterations. And alterations is one of those 5 scopes of work we talked about. And it specifies 3 different levels of alterations. And based on the scope of work, the level of alteration increases, and as the scope of work increases, the upgrades to that building, in addition to what's being proposed, some mandatory upgrades are required. And so what staff is proposing to do is to use these levels that are identified in the existing building code for the thresholds in our energy conservation code on when energy compliance requirement upgrades are also required. This recommendation is in response to the amount of feedback that we received from the public about alterations on small jobs being very difficult under our current requirements, the way the current energy code. And the current energy code uses the ratio of the value of the project in comparison to the assessed value of the property. And it creates some dilemmas. Staff believes this will address that concern. It will, however, provide some relief for the smaller projects in the amount of upgrades that are necessary in those projects. So it will be less restrictive in that aspect. Staff has also proposed an multiple amendments in the code to address the issue of all gender restrooms. We proposed amendments both in the plumbing code and in the building code because those provisions are contained in both codes. And the way that the amendments are currently drafted, all gender restrooms would not be mandatory, but they would be optional at the discretion of the building owner or their agents. Staff was also recommending that the current requirement in the code for automatic sprinkler systems for 1 and 2 family dwellings not be exempted out of the code as it currently is right now. Since 2009, the International Residential Code has required all new dwellings to be protected with automatic sprinkler systems. The City of Boulder, like many other jurisdictions, has chosen to exempt 1 and 2 family dwellings. So currently, all multifamily dwelling buildings are being protected with sprinkler systems, but detached 1 and 2 family dwellings are not being protected with automatic sprinkler systems. That requirement is in the code. It has been in the code since 2009. That requirement has an exemption for existing buildings. It only applies to new construction. It does not apply to additions or alterations unless there's already a sprinkler system in the building. So it only applies to new construction. However, if a building undergoes a change of occupancy, that would not be new construction, but that would also require the sprinkler system if it moved from a non-residential use to a residential use, to a single family. So for example, if someone had a detached studio and they wanted to convert it to an ADU, which the residential code considers a dwelling, then that would trip the sprinkler requirement. And so all detached ADUs are considered single-family dwellings under the residential code, so they would be required to be sprinkled too. So.
Looks like we have a couple of quick questions for you there, Bill. Well,
Thank you.
John, you want to go first?
What about attached ADUs that are being in an existing house?
Well, that's an existing building, so they're exempt.
I see.
Yeah.
Is there still a square footage limitation on that of 2,000 square feet or 1,600 square feet?
That's a different code section we'll get to in a minute, but council can put some type of restriction on this if they chose to, just like that, because in a minute we'll be talking about tiny houses. And so if council wanted to say, add a square footage limitation on this, then that would be at their discretion.
Cool. I'm just going to give you one quick piece of feedback, which is out of order here, but I think this is one place where I hope that you as the chief building official will be able to exercise discretion on the application of it, because sometimes there are maybe not meaningful changes of occupancy in the real world, and in terms of something becoming less hazardous but still becoming being viewed as a change of occupancy. It could be improvements in the overall fire situation. That in the past we've sometimes been able to argue that we don't need to do fire sprinkling if there's enough of a good reason not to.
And Chief Fire Marshal Lowry and I are both in agreement. We have a provision that we're fixing to share with you on that in the building code.
Great.
So this is specific to detached single-family dwellings, so these are non-mixed-use buildings. These are just a detached dwelling and nothing else.
Cool. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
So there are 3 appendices in the code that staff is recommending for adoption, and appendices have to be specifically adopted in the adopting ordinance in order for them to be applicable. They're not applicable to the code unless they are. One of those is tiny houses. This is the first edition of the residential code that has provisions for tiny houses. And tiny houses are defined as a maximum of 400 square feet. So it would be a tiny house. And so if the city wants to allow that type of dwelling, then those provisions are now in the code, and we won't have to come up with them ourselves. There's already a national standard out there that we can use. However, and before I go to it, we're also recommending light straw clay construction and straw bale construction. Both of those are environmental friendly and sustainable. And yes.
So, Will, just going back to Q, tiny houses, I wasn't clear as to whether, let's say I wanted to take a 400 square foot garage and convert it into an ADU, 399 square foot garage. Would that be governed under Appendix Q now, because you'd consider it a tiny house simply because it was sub 400 square feet? Or would it just be under general residential code?
If that was all that was in the building, it's not a unit above a garage or something like that. If it was just that 399 square feet, yes, then the designer or the owner could choose either to comply with all the requirements in the IRC, or they could use the provisions in Appendix Q.
Okay.
And Appendix Q doesn't relieve all of the requirements. It just gives some latitude for things like stairs, ladders.
They can be steeper and stuff.
Ceiling heights and some things like that.
Okay, so it would just be pick your own and come in under that code.
It's just another option.
Okay, thanks.
Another option we have available to us. And this is the first edition of the code that has had these provisions in it.
And just a clarification for the rest of the board here, that this is going to be in the building code section. It doesn't affect what's in land use code in terms of dwelling units or density or anything like that. There's no modifications on what we're familiar with dealing with. Sorry, Will.
That's fine. So the light straw clay construction and the straw bale construction are coming from a local engineering and a group of stakeholders that have an interest in this, and so they asked that I bring this forward on their behalf. So as far as the appendices, they're not part of the code unless we adopt them specifically, and we do recommend adoption of these 3. Now, a qualification on Appendix Q, if you look at the image on the left with the wheels, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a mobile unit. Staff is recommending, if we do adopt this appendix, Then we also add to it provisions for a permanent foundation and permanent connection to utilities. So the image on the right would be what that looks like. So we're not talking about a mobile device. The residential code does not regulate mobile structures. So the tiny houses, they're a maximum 400 square feet by definition. If they're over that, they can't use these provisions in this code, which provides some relief. We do recommend permanent foundations and permanent connections to utilities. And it also needs to be brought forth that the State Electrical Board has determined that these cannot be brought in from another jurisdiction, and the IRC would require that also because there have to be in-progress inspections on these units, just like there are any other dwelling. So they can't be prefabricated and brought in unless they're done under something like the state's manufactured housing program or something like that.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Your mic on? Hey, Sarah, is your mic on?
Oh, sorry. A clarifying question. The second bullet, if adopted, staff recommends adding requirements. So those requirements for permanent foundations are not part of your total package and would have to go through some separate process?
They're not part of the appendix. So if this board recommends if this board recommends, then we will add to the package some language amending this appendix to include the permanent foundation and permanent utility.
Okay, so we just have to bear that in mind when we get to that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, to your question about sprinkler systems for change of occupancy, this was the issue that this board identified for staff last time, and staff has heard this from other state community stakeholders also. So the Chief Fire Marshal and I are in agreement that this current amendment is applicable for all changes of occupancy when the fire area exceeds 2,000 square feet and there's a change of use. It's an automatic requirement. To address this concern, what staff is proposing is to use a provision in the 2018 IEBC. There's a table 1011.4, which is the means of egress that identifies when a use changes. Is it more hazardous or is it less hazardous? And so this table already exists, recommending that we use this table. And so, for example, row 5 is the lowest hazard. Row 1 is the highest hazard. So the H occupancy, which stands for hazardous occupancies. So if you're going down to a lower hazard use, then that would not require the sprinkler system to be installed. If you're going up the table, then it would require the sprinkler system to be installed. The exception to that, the way the amendment is written, is that unless there's another provision in the building code, the fire code, or the existing building code that requires that sprinkler anyway. So, but if it's not required by any other provision of the code, then we recommend using this table to determine whether it's less hazardous or more hazardous.
Thanks very much. Sorry, I got ahead of you.
We have received a lot of feedback from the community on one provision in our wildland urban interface code, and it has to do with composite decking. The provision in 503.2 of the code lists 4 types of materials that can be used for decking in the wildfire hazard area. Of course, non-combustible materials. 2 of them are fire retardant treated wood. And the 4th one is a standard, an ASTM standard that the material has to be tested to and to meet. And it's not, and that standard is not the typical standard. It's an extended time frame standard. And I've spent a half a day surfing the web trying to find a single composite decking that would meet that standard, and I have not been able to find any. And our citizens and our stakeholders are aware of that because we've denied permits. So I've received a lot of negative feedback, and I wanted to know, is there not anything that can be done? Boulder County does allow some composite decking. It doesn't meet the standard that's in 503.2, the requirement of the code, but they've amended it to allow certain materials. The California State Fire Marshal has also developed their own standard and have tested specific materials, and they actually have a list on the website that you can go to and find out if those materials are approved in the wildland urban interface. And so staff is recommending that we line up with the county. Now, this would be easing the requirement that's in the Wildland Urban Interface Code, and I wasn't here for that adoption, so I don't know what all conversations took, but this would be lowering that standard from that code, but it would be lining up with what the county's doing. Or there's another option, we could say if you find something on California's fire marshal list, we could use that. But the way the current code reads right now, there's no composite material that can be approved for decks. So staff is recommending that we line up with the county, and basically it's, they have to meet a certain flame spread index, and which has to do with how fast the fire would spread across that material.
Sarah, you got a question?
Yeah, just a question. The California index, the California rating, did I understand you to say that there are or are not products that meet that index?
Yes, I have found no products that meet the code the way it's currently written. So California has developed their own standard and their own code requirements. They have a lower standard than what the Wildland Urban Interface Code standard is, and they have additional requirements. For example, they say if the flame spread index is not what we call a Class B, then the wall within 10 feet of the deck has to be either non-combustible or rated. If it's a Class B, you don't have to do that. Boulder, the county of Boulder takes it a step further and doesn't say anything about what you have to do to the wall. They just say it has to meet a flame spread index no greater than 200. Okay. And the original standard is flame spread index of 25, and it's to a much tougher test than this one. So this would be lowering the requirement.
John, you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand, in your opinion or the fire marshal's opinion, how does the county's standard compare to the California standard in terms of effectiveness and protection?
I think the Boulder County is less stringent than the California standard. Because the California standard says if you don't meet this flame spread index no greater than 200, that's a Class C material. So we have Class A, Class B, Class C, with Class A being the best. And so this is a Class C material. And California says if you don't have at least a Class B, you've also got to make sure the wall is either non-combustible or fire resistant too.
Right, so in terms of effectiveness, in terms of degree of protection, is the California standard more protective while still including materials that are available?
It is. It is.
I've got another question.
And in my opinion, you have to look at all of the moving parts, all the different pieces too. And remember, at the same time, the county is requiring all new homes to be sprinkled. And all of our new homes, the exterior of them are either non-combustible or fire resistant. So the new homes are already meeting this criteria where we could use the California standard or the Boulder standard. So there's a lot of different pieces here. Some of it has to do with how well can we manage our defensible spaces around our house. And it's just one of the things that have been brought forth, one of the really hot topics that have been coming to my office. So I want to make sure that this board is aware of it.
Yeah, just to weigh in, I'm personally totally fine with us adopting the wildland urban interface section of the code and relaxing the deck requirements. But part of that is because I think the exterior wall systems do have to be fireproof to some level. I don't remember if there's a class or a 1-hour rating or what the deal is, but.
You're talking about the county rules or the California rules?
No, I'm talking about the building code.
Building code.
For new construction in the city of Boulder, yes, the exterior walls either have to be non-combustible or 1-hour rated.
Right, so this is a deck in front of a non-combustible wall.
Yeah, for new construction.
Yeah, for new construction.
We have a lot of retros, so.
Yeah.
For everyone
Oh, Dave.
You're going to want to come up.
Thanks, sir.
And maybe just point, that's only in the interface that we're talking about, right? I mean, so that's kind of an important part. When we say all new construction, we're talking about homes in the interface. So this is not throughout the city.
Right, cool. Thanks, Dave. Sorry, well, we want to keep going. We keep trying to stop you from making your presentation, but.
No, that's fine. So thank you for that clarification, Chief. And so now we're getting to the energy code part of it. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen.
Okay, so switching gears to the energy code, am I on? Yeah, I think I'm on. There haven't been any changes since we met back in May, really, to what we're proposing on the energy code. Just as a reminder, we take the 2018 national code and then we ratchet it up in terms of efficiency requirements to get to a code that's about 20% better overall. So I thought I would just touch on high level the major changes to the code, both the residential energy code changes and then the commercial changes. On the residential side, the biggest change we're making is we're making the HERS requirement, the ERI requirements. ERI and HERS are the same thing. So for when projects come to us for a permit, they have to meet a certain ERI criteria. The larger the home, the more stringent the ERI criteria. Right now, our code requirements are shown in blue in this graph, and the proposed requirements are shown in orange. So right now, anything over a 5,000 square foot home needs to be net zero, and what we're proposing is to drop that down to anything over 3,000 square feet would have to be net zero energy. That's probably the biggest change to the residential code. A few other changes, we are adding in what we're calling an envelope backstop. With the price of solar dropping, more and more homes, they have this ERI criteria they have to hit, and some of them are just going and purchasing enough solar to get them to that criteria. We're trying to prevent that from happening, so we still get good building envelopes. So we have some minimum insulation and window performance criteria, U values of 0.27 for fenestration, and then R values of R20 or an equivalent of R13 plus 5 for walls, and then an R14 in ceiling cavities. Another big change is we're aligning again with the county here in terms of the requirement for renewable offsets for outdoor heating. Any outdoor heating that's proposed, spas, pools, snow melt systems, all the energy consumed annually from those systems will have to be offset by renewables. Another change is to create a compliance path created around the Energy Impact Offset Fund. Again, to meet that ERI criteria or that HERS rating, often solar is required to get there. Most projects achieve that through on-site solar. They put the solar panels on their homes, but some projects don't have good orientation, or they have a tree, or they only have good northern exposure, and so that's not feasible. We've always had in our code an alternate compliance path where you could buy into a community solar program. This is just a third option in the event the community solar is not available, which we keep bumping into more and more. It would allow projects to buy into the Energy Impact Offset Fund. And then Will touched on this a little. This graph is kind of hard to read, but we're changing the energy code triggers for alterations. They're currently based on construction value relative to assessed value. We're moving to the existing building code definitions, level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, to determine how those projects have to comply. And then just a quick summary of the commercial energy code changes. We're creating an energy use index performance path. So projects, rather than creating 2 energy models and being a percentage better than a baseline model, we're assigning targets to projects. And those projects will have to create 1 energy model to demonstrate that they can comply with those targets. Another change to the commercial code is a solar mandate. 5% of buildings' energy consumption annually will need to be generated by renewables on site. Third thing is, again, the minimum insulation and building envelope criteria. Similar to the residential side, we have some minimum criteria for envelopes on the commercial side. U values of 0.36, R13, and R33 for roof insulation for commercial projects. And then again, this is what sort of the flow chart looks like for commercial projects. Same thing, the energy code currently triggers on construction value and assessed value. We're changing that to line up with these level 1, 2, 3, and 4 alterations. And then the last significant change has to do with construction and demolition waste. What's being proposed is that for all demolition projects, 75% will need to be reused or recycled, diverted from a landfill, essentially. We're also creating a deposit, a refundable deposit that will be required of all demolition projects, so that when they come in for the demo permit, they'll have to put down a deposit that they won't get back until they've demonstrated that they've actually followed through with the construction waste management plan that they set forth. And the other significant change is that
these will apply not only in the current code, this only applies to residential projects, and we're expanding that to all commercial projects as well. And that, one more. I'll pass it to you for.
So that concludes our presentation. We'll be glad to answer any additional questions you have. Staff is looking for a recommendation from this board to City Council regarding our proposed amendments to Title 10.
Cool. Any questions from staff that we didn't already get off our chests? Nope. John?
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in the changed treatment of tiny houses. And I'm just wondering, can you summarize what those changes actually are?
Sure. It's only a couple pages in the code, so it's not too difficult. For example, you've probably are a little familiar with them. It's not uncommon for there to be a loft used as a bedroom. That loft doesn't have to be more than, only has to be 3 feet in height. So you know, in a house, you can't go under 7 feet except for certain areas. So that's reduced down to 3 feet. You still have to meet the dimensional criteria for the egress window, but in this case, it actually could be a skylight that opens that way so you could go out. The geometry for stairs is reduced to where it can almost be a ladder-type device to get to the loft, and then the ceiling height is reduced. So it's those kind of logistical things that are being lessened in the code.
So am I correct in understanding that the safety is not being lessened? It's a matter of convenience aspects that are mostly affected by these changes?
I don't know if I can say that the safety isn't being lessened, because a lot of time and research and man-hours have gone into the codes to get them where we're at, and a lot of engineering and scientific studies are behind a lot of our code requirements. I think this is a compromise with the code trying to meet social trends, just like it is with the gender-neutral restrooms. The codes realize that we live in a ever-changing society that is willing to accept different norms, and it's a compromise on the limited amount of users that are going to be using the tiny home. For example, maybe this will help. We have one set of criteria for stairs for commercial buildings, and we have another set of criteria for stairs for residential buildings. And the reason for that is because residential occupants are more familiar with their surroundings, so that we give them a little bit more flexibility. And I think the code takes that approach with this and say there's only going to be a certain amount of people that can use this, and a certain amount, and they're going to be familiar with the hazards that are associated with their increased stair rise and their decreased stair tread, but the handrail requirements stay in place. So I think it's a compromise between current code requirements and the what society has said that they want to see in the codes.
Could I just...
Yeah, actually, I want to follow up on the tiny home thing, too.
So I appreciate that's an excellent explanation. I guess I should rephrase my question. I'm wondering about hygiene and sanitation and those characteristics also with respect to tiny houses, and say plumbing and other related facilities.
That's a great question. So in order to meet the definition of a dwelling has to provide permanent facilities for living, eating, cooking, sleeping, and sanitation. If it doesn't provide all 5 of those, it doesn't meet the definition of a dwelling.
Then you're just sleeping in a shed.
So are there any distinctions in those requirements for the code aspects of those requirements? I'm not thinking of the angle of the stairs or something like that, but things like that.
I don't require seeing any of those. I could look it up real quick if you want me to.
I'd just be interested to know if those differ in tiny houses
Not on my
versus...
computer, I can't.
I've got it open if you want to read it.
Oh.
Read it out, sing it.
Why don't you read it out
Dance
loud?
it out.
So which part exactly did you want to hear?
Well, the sanitation and,
Oh, I don't have that part of the building code open. No, I've got the tiny home code open.
So if it's not addressed in the tiny home section, it goes back to the regular code requirements.
So it's just regular IRC.
so the regular code requirements.
Yeah, the regular
So same as any house.
are in effect. The only relief you get are those issues that are specifically addressed in the tiny house appendix.
Yeah, so it's the same exact rules as a house except for headroom, minimum area, head height and loft area, loft access, and the location of the egress window. That's kind of about it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
I had one question on this. Like, let's say that someone wants to use a fixed foundation tiny home like is allowed through this code. It's 380 square feet or whatever, or 250 square feet, whatever the area requirements can like culminate in. But they also want to make it affordable through the city's program. I think we're going to run into a place where the livability standards bump into the tiny home standards. So I think we need to make an exception in the code that says, like, if you're trying to meet, or if you want to make a tiny home and make it affordable, you can still follow the tiny home requirements and not do the livability standards, because those don't work with us at all. That's going to be a code conflict.
That's like minimum square feet per bedroom and things that are
Having a
required
wash and
under-
dryer and having a X amount of storage and there's a bunch of things in the livability standards which really bulk up unit size.
Oh, that's a great suggestion. I think we should have motion language to realize that.
So would that be better suited in the land use code or in the building code, or in the residential code?
It actually probably needs to be in the livability standards, that it doesn't apply to tiny homes, but you tell me, because you're the one who understands this stuff better.
Well, I think that the livability standards are part of the land use code and then inclusionary housing requirements, so I think that's where it probably should be addressed.
Can we add that into the housekeeping part of this code modification? Just so that as a result of our recommendation, we don't create a conflict in the code?
Yeah, the staff is ready and willing to modify the amendments ever how we're directed by this board.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, Brian, if I can jump in on this really quick. Sorry, I know there's like floating voices happening here, dueling sides. I think if the board were to make a recommendation related to changing those livability standards, because those are in a separate section of the code, it really then at that point it's a policy matter for us to decide if we want to change those livability standards. So I think it would be best to address it there rather than trying to address it through the building code.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody on this side of the table is going to be able to draft ordinance language to do that as a part of this, so maybe we'll have that be a motion to council that you guys can support with a proper code amendment when it gets there. The other thing I wanted to ask about is, these tiny homes would still have to be fire sprinkled, right, because they are dwelling units?
They would, unless council amends that provision of the code, which can't,
Right.
there are no federal or state preemptions for sprinkler requirements. So council can amend that section of the code ever how they choose to, just like now they exempted all 1 and 2 family dwellings. You could exempt, dwellings less than X square feet or whatever way you chose to.
Yeah, and I think they've actually made them fire sprinkle the ADUs, so I imagine if the mood is consistent, it would be fire sprinkling, but.
Can I just want to make sure I'm understanding, you're asking a question about whether the tiny homes should be fire.
I'm asking not should, but whether the proposal is, would they?
Would they?
And the answer is yes.
Yes, okay.
The way the code is written, yes.
Yeah.
They meet the definition of a dwelling.
Yep. And just in terms of my opinion on that, it's like above my pay grade. It can go to council and they can talk about it. Other thoughts or questions on this before we possibly make a motion?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see that commercial development is required to recycle its construction waste, I think is the right term as well. I know it was something that was brought up in May, and I think it's wonderful that you guys included it.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, with respect to, again, with tiny houses and your recommendation for foundations and so on, is it the land use code that determines where they could be sited given flood concerns and aspects like that?
If council wants to allow tiny homes, then yes, the locations would have to be addressed through the land use codes. The building codes typically do not address land use issues. The one exception to that is setbacks to property lines. The closer you get to a property line, the more fire resistive that wall has to be. That's the one exception to land use issues that the building codes. Otherwise, they don't address where you can put a building or where you could locate a certain use or anything like that. The building code takes the position, if you're going to build it for this use or these uses, these are the rules.
Right. There's an interesting confluence between the FAR requirements in the land use code and the allowable area requirements based on different occupancy types and property sizes in the building code, but they're not in conflict either.
Right. Just to follow up on the foundation issue, is the nature of the foundation that's required specified, or is it related to the, whether it's in the 100-year flood or the
All of the rules that apply to any other detached single-family home for the foundations would apply to these foundations.
So the same requirements?
There's no provisions in the tiny home appendix that address that issue. So it would be all the standard rules in the residential code for foundations, designed for wind speed, for snow loads, for all of those types of things.
Thank you.
Yes.
Cool. I'm going to call myself a little bit, but I'll keep it to a minimum. I really appreciate I just feel like having gone through this cycle a bunch of times, I really appreciate the direction everything's moving, and I think it's like really working well. I know it's rocky when we adopt new things, the energy code or different pieces of it, and we learned a lot from it. I think you guys have done a great job of like hearing people's concerns, seeing what didn't work that well, repositioning, things like, fixing the way we calculate what's required, whether it's, level 1, 2, 3, or 4 alterations versus, relative cost of construction versus appraisals. Just a lot of stuff's, I think, moving in the right direction, and really, really in line with the city's goals. It's great. I'm also really glad to see us hitting a few social justice things like the gender-neutral bathrooms. I like getting rid of the, personally, I don't know why City Council last 2 cycles, I think, didn't or accepted single-family homes from fire sprinkling. To me, that just seems like a gift to the rich, and I'm not sure why they would need that, or why they should not be as safe as someone else. Just it seemed like an odd thing for them to do, but I'm glad we're suggesting that we stop doing that. And then in terms of the decking and firewise style of construction, I think the approach that you're talking about makes sense. So I think, and also feel like whenever we can, if we can do things the same way as a county or back and forth, that's going to be helpful for everybody who's doing work around here. I'm kind of curious, Kristen, like in terms of the ERI chart, how closely does that mirror the county's ERI chart?
It's pretty close. We're a little bit more aggressive. They're on a similar timeline to roll out a 2020 code as well. And talking to Ron Flaxey, they're in a similar, theirs will likely be similar to where we're proposing ours.
Great, that's good. Yeah, and I feel like back when they first started adopting HERS ratings in the county, me and a few other architects, and this is story time, sorry guys, me and a few other architects put together charts of our last dozen or so buildings and showed that everything we'd been doing for 10 years already exceeded their supposedly aggressive requirements, and really helped the people who were trying to adopt those codes feel like this is not that crazy an ask, you can do it. And I feel the same way about where you guys are at now. I don't feel like it's, I feel like it's aggressive in terms of where things are, but it's definitely not brushing against technical feasibility.
Definitely. We spent a lot of time talking with HERS raters locally to sort of gauge that, to make sure we weren't pushing it too technically far. And we think they're achievable.
Cool. Anybody else?
Just comment time?
Yeah, if you guys want to make random comments, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll make a very short random comment. When we heard from y'all on May 16th with the draft, the 2 things that were most important to me that I commented most strongly on were to have some reasonable relief for occupancy changes, especially in commercial, from fire suppression requirements, And I think you handled that beautifully in conjunction with the fire chief. And the other piece was to provide a toolbox approach towards meeting your energy offsets. And you did that with a three-way to offset approach for those on-site renewable energy goals that we've set. So I think you handled that beautifully too. So on both sides of the energy and the building code, my two issues were well met, and I could make a motion if others don't have additional comments.
Go for it.
Can I just ask it's more of a process question? So my sense from this presentation is that the two elements that we need to give you some feedback on beyond the motion are the fixed foundations for tiny homes, and then an answer to the what is the appropriate level of fire protection for the urban wildlife interface porches. Am I understanding that correctly?
The way that the amendment is written right now for the wildland-urban interface, it lines up with the county requirements.
Okay.
If you want us to do something different, then yes, you would need to give direction for that.
So then the only thing is the fixed foundation for the tiny homes?
And the fixed utilities, permanent.
And the fixed utilities, okay.
Yes.
So I know I'm going to want that. I'm wondering if we can already ask you to draft up whatever needs, if something hasn't already been drafted as an amendment. Would it be an amendment to the motion?
I didn't draft anything, but I think you could just
speak to it.
You could just do that as part of the motion. I mean, maybe you can have a discussion first on who supports it before you start drafting it, and I think we'll understand what you mean.
Okay.
So discussion on fixed foundations. You're looking for us to actually add motion language, Will? Let's just be clear.
Modify the amendments to include fixed foundations.
To include the requirement of fixed foundations and
to the
fixed
tiny
utilities.
homes, appendix.
And alternately, we could just remain silent on that, and that same question would rise to city council, right? So we wouldn't necessarily need to weigh in.
Well, I think city council is asking for our opinion on that, so we should.
Council hasn't directed us to do anything, but.
Yeah, that's true. But also, would it be useful to you if we made that motion now so that you could start drafting that language prior to the council hearing?
It would be, and it would be helpful when I go to council to say this is what the planning board has recommended for approval.
So could you articulate, to get our discussion started, why you think it's important that tiny homes have fixed foundations and fixed utilities?
If they don't, then how do we address the mobility issue other than the fixed structure issue and the sanitation issues and setback issues and, all the land use issues and the sanitation issues that go with a dwelling?
Mm-hmm.
Is it also part to do with the progressive inspection regime that you want to have for built-in-place tiny homes? Is it in line with that?
If we do adopt the appendix, they're already subject to those all the same inspections any home is, yes.
Right.
Yes. And so if we don't put those provisions in the code, then how is staff going to make that determination now? How are we going to anchor these systems to resist our wind loads and to address gravity loads and everything else? Then staff's going to have to come up with a game plan. It's much better to have prescriptive requirements in the code and say that you have to do with these dwellings the same thing you do with all your other dwellings.
Peter?
Would there be any change to the way property values are assessed? Fixed foundation versus not fixed foundation?
I'm not qualified to answer that question, but my opinion would be yes.
So that would be another incentive on the city's part to require fixed foundations because it would increase property taxes.
But it sounds to me that the system moves in this direction towards fixed foundations, and if we don't move in that direction as well, these will be sort of, this is the wrong term, but sort of almost orphaned kind of buildings within the code.
And And one position can be taken as an interpretation, since it's not mentioned in the tiny home appendix, that you have to revert back to the typical code requirements. But several people have asked me about this issue, so I wanted it nailed down. I wanted to say, no, it's specifically addressed that it has to be on a permanent foundation and it has to be permanently connected to utilities.
As I understand it, what you're basically saying is they can't meet the dwelling unit requirements, or I don't have the correct language and I apologize for that, but they don't meet the requirements of the city without a fixed foundation, essentially. They don't meet.
Yeah, I think it's not a building. So if it's not a building, then it's not a dwelling unit in our codes. It's an RV or it's a manufactured housing unit or something else. It's not a building, so it wouldn't fall into the same codes, and actually would be in fact governed by state or federal codes for manufactured housing or RV construction and stuff like that. So it kind of is almost like, because this is in the building code, it's sort of like inherently a foundation kind of thing, because like you said, it doesn't, I mean, there's nothing in what I'm reading here that says this is a kind of building that can be built on wheels without a frost-protected foundation. It's not in here, so I don't even see this as an actual question myself. But I get that you're getting, I mean, the world is out there thinks of tiny homes on wheels, and this is really written for not that.
Right, but it just sounds like it's missing a sentence or two that clarify that even though out in the other outside outside, there are tiny homes that have wheels, inside Boulder, the tiny homes wouldn't have wheels.
I don't know about all jurisdictions.
No, but inside Boulder, I'm talking about inside Boulder.
Right.
So that seems like from my perspective, like a pretty straightforward clarification.
You know, piggybacking on what Sarah just said, if we're recommending changes to the land use code, maybe having a definition in 916 of the land use code for tiny houses that would square up what we consider a tiny house and what we don't. Because we're going to mention it, right? If we change the livability standards in 913, we're going to have a definition somewhere for what a tiny house is. So it should be in the land use code too.
Actually, I'm gonna be a Harmon on you here and say, like, so if you read the tiny home code, it references the definitions portion of the building code, which is what we're already talking about adopting, and it's not a part of the appendix that needs to be additionally adopted for the definition of a dwelling unit. And the dwelling unit is a single unit providing a complete independent living facilities for one or more persons, including permanent provisions for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. It's already, I think, in there in terms of like being very clear.
I get that the definition of living unit is clear.
Dwelling unit?
Dwelling unit, but the definition of tiny house
is tied to dwelling unit. So tiny house equals dwelling unit of a certain variety.
Yeah, it would be a dwelling unit use under the land use code.
Say that?
It would be a dwelling unit use under the land use code.
Do you see that there's any value to having a specific definition for tiny houses in the definitions in the land use code, so we can reinforce that a tiny house isn't a trailer that you can drag into your backyard and attach to a sump pump?
It seems like to me, if we were to define that, it'd be better in the land use code than in altering the building code, which is already
that's
internally.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you, yeah.
Well, I think if the requirements are that there's a fixed foundation, then they will automatically meet the dwelling unit definition. And then I would only add a definition for tiny houses in the land use code if there were specific requirements that were different from other dwelling units under the land use code.
So I'm going to suggest that, if I do make this motion, that we further recommend, I would recommend approval of the proposed amendments, and then planning board would further recommend that the livability standards section in the code.
I've got language for that if you want.
Oh, I just wrote some, and we can compare notes. Mine says that BRC 93135 livability standards under the inclusionary housing chapter of the code be amended such that dwelling units that are permitted under Appendix Q tiny houses and which are also permanently affordable under the city's IH program not be required to meet the livability standards.
Yours is better than mine.
You sure?
Yep.
And does that seem like the kind of code change, Hella, that, it's general, right? So the staff could could still wordsmith how that changes 913.5, but is that where you'd want it?
Yeah, I mean, we would want to talk with the housing folks. I don't know what's in the regulations as well. We might need to take a look at those, but yeah, I think it needs to be addressed probably in 913 and potentially also in the regulations.
Yeah, I know concurrently to this process, the housing folks are looking at the livability standards and how they work. So there's a kind of backroom process that's being contemplated there too. So I think it actually, I mean, from our perspective, it makes sense to like say exactly what you said and then let them, you know, like you said, wordsmith it the way they need to.
And I'll go as far as to just put it on the record that if you do further analysis and realize that the planning board's intent would be better served by putting it somewhere else, you know, you can do that prior to final adoption hearings in front of city council. But I want to get this in there with some specificity to help you go. And then the second item would just be that the tiny houses code be modified to require that tiny houses be set on fixed foundations and be served by fixed utilities. So those would be my two additional recommendations after the motion, if I were to make a motion.
Can I just ask you to unpack the first half? Because it sounded to me like, here's how I heard it, which was that the tiny homes that would be permanently affordable would not be required to be hooked up to...
No, it would not be required to meet the livability standards, which are space requirements that require things like washer dryers, entry closets, linear footage of kitchens, stuff like that, room square footages. So if somebody did want to do a tiny home and they wanted to make an affordable one, it would be illegal because it wouldn't be able to meet the livability standards. So if we're encouraging people to do affordable units and we think it's okay for them to do tiny homes, we should make it so that they don't have to apply conflicting standards to the same structure.
And do they still need to be fixed foundation?
Yeah, it's separate from that.
Okay, I was trying to understand exactly what you were getting at.
And we can soften it. We could say that they not be required to meet all of the livability standards, or that the livability standards should be relaxed.
I think the way you did it is the right way to do it, because nobody here understands livability standards well enough to like have a nuanced conversation about that.
Okay. So John, wanted to say something, Brian.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was focused on Sarah over there, so.
In fact, I think your suggestion of not meeting all livability standards, sticking that little revision in there, I think that makes sense, because we encourage as many of the livability standards to be met as reasonably can be by, that's the implication.
I mean, I'm happy to make the change if others on the board would rather see it that way.
I would rather see it that way.
I don't have strong feelings about it.
Okay, so I'll put the all of back in. Okay.
Okay, cool. I think you should make that motion.
You make that motion.
Yeah, go.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right, so Planning Board recommends approval of proposed amendments to BRC 1981 Title 10, including adoption of the 2018 International Building Codes and the 2020 City of Boulder Energy Conservation Code.
I'll second that.
In addition, Planning Board further recommends, wait till I say this to second it. In addition, Planning Board further recommends that changes, or I should just say, Planning Board further recommends changes related to tiny houses. One, that BRC 913.5 livability standards under the inclusionary housing chapter of the code be amended such that dwelling units that are permitted under Residential Code Appendix Q, tiny houses, and which are also permanently affordable under the city's IH program, not be required to meet all of the livability standards. And two, that the tiny houses code be modified to require that tiny houses be set on fixed foundations and be served by fixed utilities. And I can forward that language to you, Cindy.
Well, I will second that.
Okay.
Does anybody want to speak to that motion? Okay, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Really appreciate, this is a hugely complicated, gigantic, messy, convoluted set of documents here, and you guys made it so that we could understand it.
Yeah, thank you.
Which is amazingly,
Thanks for reading it.
Yeah.
That's the longest packet of all time. So
The
thanks for putting it
combined
together.
packet tonight was like 8 million pages.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
It broke the city's website. But I think that was mostly JVA's gigantic, weird PDFs. Those guys. Okay, everybody want to press on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So last item on our agenda for tonight is not a public hearing item. It is a review of the planning board application for the 2020 boards and commissions annual recruitment process. And I think Cindy's going to be able to put that up on the screen and we can fiddle with it if we'd like to.
So can I just tell you what I tried to do here? So Peter was trying, I was trying to take Peter's point from, you were sick last time. So what I thought I heard you saying as I thought about it was that applicants appreciate the expertise they're going to have to develop over time about the shared frameworks that we utilize here. And I tried to add that with that sentence, at the last sentence in the first paragraph, that board members will develop deep familiarity with. That was my sense of what you were trying to get at.
I like that.
And then I just added Brian's changes in terms of, there's some grammatical errors in here, so we'll have to fix those. And then to the question of how much time people should expect to, about absences and how much time this would take. The absence thing was I was trying to balance the fact that people will be absent, and yet we have this expectation of attending all meetings. And then I realized as I was trying to put an hour figure on how much time you spend preparing, for those who are new, you spend perhaps more time than those who've been doing it for a while. And so my standard might not be Harmon or Brian's standard. So I tried to make it somewhat vague. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish. Oh, wait, there was, and then there was this last question at the very end. So question 9, this was actually a suggestion from David that he had suggested a couple of years ago and wanted to put out there again. And so I tried to frame it in a way that would elicit some sense of an applicant's understanding of the public participation working group recommendations and how it has actually begun to change our processes or improve our processes in terms of public engagement, and if they've had additional ideas or thoughts or their own experience with the public engagement process. So that's the background for the various changes that are here.
Cool. Can I look at that last one real quick before you go away from it, Cindy? Okay, cool. My only thought on that, I like it a lot. I'm really glad that's being added. I think it's cool. I would just think that maybe we could say, maybe in the beginning of the second sentence, knowing that planning board is not charged with doing community engagement, because it's actually not our charter. So I want to make sure that they don't get the impression from this that like, what could you do as a planning board member to do community engagement? Because I don't want people feeling like, oh, I've got to go knock on doors or have coffees at my house or whatever, just to make sure it doesn't get confused that way.
Sure. Fine by me.
Do you want to, as long as we're here, you want to start drafting it?
Yeah, I mean, it could be just right where the word do is in the middle of that. So beginning at the first word of the second sentence. Yeah. So maybe acknowledging that planning board is not charged with community engagement, comma, do. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, I'm interrupting you in the middle of your sentence because I'm having a thought about this, which is, I feel like the sentence gives the applicant an opportunity to share with council, who will appoint them, what community engagement processes they themselves as citizens have been involved in, if any, which would be an interesting component of their application. So if it was something like acknowledging that planning board is not charged with community engagement, what community engagement processes have you yourself been involved with? And based on that, what steps do you think could be taken to further enhance?
I wouldn't say based on that, because it implies that unless you've been involved, you can't weigh in. So I would just say, I like that idea of saying like, behind that sentence, second sentence, second sentence, it could say, have you been involved with any community engagement processes in the city?
That's a much
Just to get that
yeah.
candidly straight in there. Yeah, have you personally been involved with any community engagement processes with the city?
Because that'll be an expertise or an experience they bring to the board.
Yep, and then I would get rid of the if so part. I would get rid of the if so part, because that implies that you can only weigh in on that if you've been involved.
Just what steps?
Just say what steps.
What's the last sentence?
Or do you have ideas for,
Yeah.
so that like what steps could be taken to further enhance public engagement? I mean, it doesn't have to be like the most amazing sentence ever. I think it's pretty clear.
And we can always,
Yeah, city council will fiddle with it too.
okay.
I think that's good.
A lot of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, on number 9,
Yeah, it's a 9-page essay.
let's look at the question and see what it's trying to say.
Well, actually, I think the second sentence and the fourth sentence are now the same. So you could actually just get rid of the fourth sentence.
Yeah, you're right.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
Yeah. Delete it before Peter reads it.
I gotta save me that editing.
And then you really only have two questions.
I think I'd take out the first sentence too. What purpose are we serving with that?
Well, it started off the thought, and so I think it was important, and then it got us where we need to be. So I think that we could remove it or go to the heart of the matter and get to the question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it frames it nicely, and it also gets in the public participation working group part, which is not said elsewhere.
Yeah, it does kind of telegraph that that is part of the volunteer work
It
as
lets them know
well.
that you can like go look that up and
Yes, exactly.
be informed, so.
Right.
I
It's
like
one
it.
of those documents that will frame the work that you will see when you sit on the board. But it's not necessary, but I don't think it hurts to have it there.
I mean, it feels like, do you see a need for improvement in this area as like a non-question because you've just said that the city of Boulder has implemented the recommendations to better engage them? Do you think there should be improvement? Who's going to say no?
Well, there's actually 2 more phases of the public participation working group. They're in the middle or completing phase 2 now, and then there's a phase 3. So it might be.
Yeah, it's fine.
We don't need it. We don't need the first sentence, but I do think it does kind of, for someone who's coming in whose expertise may actually be, the land law, they may not be all that familiar with the public participation working group. I don't know. It's.
Yeah.
I think erring on the side of too much is okay.
I don't know, I think it's fine that way, but I was going to say actually, instead of do you see a need for improvement in this area, let's like say, do you have ideas for improvement in this area?
Yeah.
That's great.
That was maybe what was bugging me. It was setting someone up to, like a softball question, like, I do see a need, and that's it.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yes, there should be.
Okay.
Because I gotta say, like, reading these applications for the past like 7 years, like, some people will write like 2 pages for this, and people are like, yes, there should be improvement. Oh, wow, that's crazy. So should we look at the other ones? Is everybody cool with this one?
I'd just like to suggest, I think the second sentence, it reads better to me if the second sentence becomes the third and the third becomes the second.
Cool, that's fine.
Do people agree with that?
Go for it.
Yep.
Can you just grab that middle sentence and put it on the end, Cindy, please?
Yeah, it does, because it ties into the working group concept. And it,
David will be so happy.
That's what we're here for.
I like a happy.
Maybe he's watching.
God, David, if you're watching, dude.
Hi, David.
Come on, buddy.
He's drinking coffee halfway around the world.
It's gotta be.
In the morning. Is it morning there?
New Zealand has all kinds of entertainment opportunities.
All right.
Okay. Should we scroll up to the other stuff?
back up
May
to
I
the other
ask,
stuff.
they really only want us to look at these questions that are on the screen
5 through 8, which is 5 through 9 now. So the other questions, what do you think?
I'm personally fine with them.
Just leave them the way they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's, I'm happy with
And you were okay with
Seems like we got a collective
intro?
meh.
No, we haven't gone through those yet.
I mean, I may have to recuse myself from that question because I'm employed by the firm that participated in the design of the Pearl Street Mall, so I probably shouldn't weigh in on it.
Exactly. Got to recuse yourself from the letter writing process. You can't go anywhere. You're just stuck here. Has everybody had a chance to read these, and is everybody cool with them, or what do you guys think? I have not, but.
What is this stuff about Queen Sarah Silverman we have to worship?
Bring gifts.
Queen for the day. You will appoint Sarah queen for the day.
Forever.
Forever.
Sucker.
Thank you for doing this, Sarah.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, just on that little sentence, just to make it right, I think it's just Landmarks Board. You just take the preservation advisory out. The short paragraph in the middle.
And it's actually not advisors. You should probably use the nouns that are in the.
Yeah, so board members serve as one board member serves as an ex officio member to the Landmarks Board.
So maybe the way to do that is Landmarks Board, ex officio member, Design Advisory Board, whatever the right title is, and Greenways
officio.
Program.
I think it's
whatever the
Greenways
right title
Advisory
is.
Committee.
Right, so board members serve in various positions too.
I think, are they all ex officio?
No, only Landmarks is an ex officio.
No, design advisory
Greenways, you
board
do
says-
get to vote once
Yeah.
a year on the CIP.
Can you find that? Because I looked in the code and I couldn't see that we were ex officio to the DAB.
That's how it's written on their
Really?
minutes every time.
Is that right?
It's not it's not in the code, it's
No? Or-
not an ex officio position.
So I think,
We're just a non-voting
Cindy,
member of DAB, or I don't even know if members.
we
are-
were thinking of, have it say board members are
Yeah, you're not a board member if you're
Yeah.
there.
are appointed to various various positions on the,
The same paragraph?
yeah, so we're going to, since it's not all since advisors is the wrong term for each of these, it doesn't apply to each of these positions, we're just trying to make it clear. So board advisors, board members are appointed, or no, I'm sorry, board members, don't type anything yet. Board members serve in various, what's the right way to say this?
In various capacities.
Various capacities, thank you.
How about board members serve other boards in various capacities?
Fine.
Serve? Assist? Participate?
Dominate?
I gotta make it bigger. Sorry, guys, I'm going blind.
So, and I think it's just, we're the ex officio member to the Landmarks Board. We are a voting member of the Greenways Advisory Committee.
Right.
And we're a barnacle on the Design Advisory Board with no legal status.
The minutes say
Barnacle is a
planning board ex officio member on the DAB minutes. So that's what they.
That just means
tell me.
DAB doesn't know the code. That doesn't mean that.
DAB staff, actually, we're talking about
You're
here.
ex officio because DAB thinks you are. You
I'm just saying.
self-aggrandizing.
Because I want more Latin in my life. Yeah.
So board members serve on, and then I would say get rid of voting advisors to get rid of that part. And then, so get rid of the two also. And then after Landmarks Board, parentheses would be what is the?
Ex officio member.
And then, close parentheses, and then Greenways Advisory Committee, whatever, what is that position?
It's a member. You're a full voting member.
So voting member, or whatever the right term would be.
Is that what?
Is it a voting member? Is that the?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't call that a title or anything. I might just say
Do we need,
a member of the Greenways Advisory Committee.
yeah, do we need the details for the purpose of this letter? It's board members serve on boards including the following.
Well, the fact that it's, I think I'm just trying to respond to they have different levels of responsibility, and so this is one way to do it. What is Design Advisory Board? Is that ex officio also?
Brian thinks so, but it's not.
No, it's not a codified role. I think it's a collaborative.
Okay, so
Varying levels on.
advisor. An advisor be, so we'll use the term advisor. And then, and parentheses, period, and get rid of the and.
And then there is another role, and it's to HAB.
Oh, right.
Yeah, now we have a HAB member.
We have.
Isn't Crystal still on that for us?
No, it's David.
Yeah, don't tell her.
It's David right now.
Sorry, Crystal.
And they are ex officio?
Yes.
Yes, ex officio. Okay.
I mean, as long as we're listing things, we can talk about liaison to the East Boulder subcommunity plan.
Well, I get to that later when I say.
There's a whole shitload of those
Applicants should
going to that.
expect to spend significant time preparing, serving as, participating in planning board subcommittees and other board-related activities. I think that
Okay, that's fine.
cover all that other stuff.
I'm good.
Cool.
So
our very own appointments from our meeting minutes from our retreat list Landmarks, Housing Advisory Board, Greenways, and DAB, all as ex officio members.
Well, the Greenways is certainly wrong because we're just a member.
I'm just saying what I'm reading in the stuff that everyone's written
That just
down.
means there are 2 errors and not just 1.
Okay.
Or 3.
I have a suggestion that we.
I'm just saying this, maybe we shouldn't be stuck on the nouns if we're making them up in this meeting.
Right. My suggestion is we make sure we like what's there, and then we can go through it with a fine-tooth comb and fact check. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay. So I think my only question to Peter is, does that last sentence in the first paragraph capture what it was you were trying to convey in our last meeting?
I'd say board members will become familiar with criteria-based decision-making and X such as BVCP, Boulder Land Use Code, Development or Master Plans, and other, and we don't need other city planning documents because that's expected if they're on the planning board. But board members will become familiar with criteria-based decision-making. And
can I switch it around? I think if we leave here, because you're starting with the big picture, which are here are the framing documents we have to use, and you're going to be using those to make.
With blah, 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 and after master plans, say, and we'll, it's a learning opportunity, for me at least, it really was, of how to parse my thoughts into what is relevant to the discussion.
Peter, you know, when you brought this up a couple weeks ago, your point wasn't that we'd become familiar. Your point was that we needed the applicants to understand that they were going to be responsible for having
to get up to speed
that knowledge, or for getting up to speed with that knowledge, and certainly for making criteria-based decisions based on those documents. This is all kind of aspirational, you know, you're going to get there.
It's a 5-year appointment, and I didn't, it came out stronger than it was meant to.
Okay.
I think that's what concerned Lupita. That's not what I was trying to say. It was more that this is going to be part of the expectations, and it's a process. It's something that we all teach each other. Remember at our last retreat, one of our retreats before, Sarah and Lupita were on the board, we joked about having a stuffed animal rabbit that we could put up there, and someone started going down the rabbit hole, because it's a real thing, and we rely on each other to stay on it, because it's easy to spiral out. And my point was, we need to set a great example for the public, and then we're going to start having discussions based on criteria, as well as all the other discussions. And she thought I was saying that there's no place for any of that, and that's not what I meant. I was under the weather. Just that it's a part of the volunteer work, and it's a duty to the community for us to keep in mind how we need to knock through the criteria-based issues and not get lost on things, because that only confuses the public who spend way less time with this material than us.
Right. And so I appreciate the idea of this, changing the second half of that sentence. And what I was trying to get to was that for people who are not coming in as experts already in the various framing documents, part of your responsibility will be becoming familiar with them, and it is a process. And if all we had were people on the board who were already familiar, it would be a very different kind of volunteer opportunity, and would serve a different purpose. It would be more of a technical review board. So Cindy, if you would delete what you have highlighted right now.
You weren't there, I said that you had
and add something like.
To nail down all the pieces. And that we're not all like that, but we could learn to be. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So that second half of the sentence, you want to have it respond to the need for being comfortable with criteria-based decision-making, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, and become comfortable with criteria-based decision-making?
Yeah. Which is really just code for objectivity and what any good
Right, and that's-
quasi-judicial
Right.
person should have.
So do you feel like that sentence captures what you were
Yeah,
trying
it's
to
great.
convey? Okay. And then I guess the only other question is the issue that Brian brought up, which was about absences and attendance and time. And are you comfortable with?
Before we go on,
Sorry.
I wanted to suggest a change, just to kind of get us to a middle ground, or at least a little closer to a sense of, this expectation that this is the business end of what we do. So instead of board members will become familiar, board members are expected to become familiar.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Because it didn't happen on accident.
You just need an R between members and expected. There you go. And then I think, just for readability, and to become comfortable, to become comfortable at the last clause there. Yeah. Does that sound good, guys?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then Brian, it's this paragraph, the second two sentences in the paragraph that starts, meetings are generally. This was trying to get to the concern that you have raised about absences and attendance, while taking into account we all have jobs and lives and can't always make it. Do you feel?
That seems great. I think
okay?
that's handled with a nice attitude. Appreciate it.
I agree.
And the last sentence, trying to avoid the discussion that happened about how many hours, but rather just to let people know that this is a significant volunteer responsibility.
So whereas I thought will be expected was stronger in the above paragraph we were talking about, I think should expect is weaker in this sentence, and if we just change this to applicants will spend significant time preparing. It's like a command. You will spend significant time.
It's a prediction.
Fine by me.
So take expect out, please, and to. Yep.
I looked the other day at how many folders I have in my.
Other boards, plural, later on in that sentence.
No, actually, I didn't mean for that to be other board. It was really specifically activities related to this board, like the service on the East Boulder sub-community plan. We can change it to say something else, but it was really meant to refer specifically to stuff related to the board work.
Yeah, but it doesn't read right.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about other board-related activities. I'm sorry. I'm missing an S there. You're right.
Okay, now.
Sorry about that. We were talking about two different things.
Now I can breathe.
I don't know what she's talking about.
Sorry.
But you exhibited great patience.
Yeah.
Maybe since
He's the elder. He patience.
maybe since we're saying landmarks in the code is the only official ex officio board position, we could just say serving on other boards or serving
No,
with.
Housing Advisory Board.
Oh, right, okay, so that's fine. But that doesn't take into account the equally important work on GAC and on,
Love saying that.
yeah, I do, and on,
I'm going to kill Cindy.
on DAB. So if you just say serving with other boards, it shortens it, right?
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Serving with other boards.
That's fine, totally fine.
So take out as ex officio members of, sorry, Cindy, just go back and delete as. Back. There you go. With other. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Did we do it with
One
that?
other matter, when we're done, if we're done here. I saw Lupita on Sunday, and she just asked me to double check to see what the status of the gender workshop discussion is, where that's, if that's moved forward at all.
Yeah, she and I sent Chris an email about what kind of resources the city has to offer.
Yeah, so the city staff, and if it's external resources, we're happy to help facilitate that process. And I think the next step, Brian and Lupita and I were going to sit down and kind of scope out maybe what that might look like, think about maybe some options of time frame in terms of kind of a retreat with the board, and then we thought we would bring that back to everyone, and then we can kind of land on what that looks like, and we're happy to help support that conversation.
Great, okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Lupita will appreciate that. All right, I'm done.
Cool. Everybody good?
I have one
Cindy's got
reminder. Our next planning board meeting is November 6th. At any rate, it is off-site. It's not here. It's on the 7th, excuse me. It is in the Breton Building. So just a reminder. I will, of course, will remind you via email, but it is not here.
I had asked Chris today whether city council meets after the election, and then that raised the question of will planning board meet between the end of the election and the beginning of the new city council?
Yes.
Yes, we do, okay.
Nothing
you'll meet on the
changes
7th.
for us
Okay.
until a new board member is appointed to replace Brian.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I'm saying that the election doesn't change anything for us.
No.
Except a new board member will replace Brian that will be appointed by the new council in March.
Unless the
In
city
March.
council does something unusual in their work plan that shifts things
Right.
for us before that. But yeah, usually that's not
Do we have an
no
agenda
impact for us, so.
for the 7th?
For the 7th, not yet. That will be out next Friday.
Okay.
So we have 2
Attendance
weeks
check?
without a meeting.
I'm sorry?
We have
Do we
2
wanna do an
weeks without a
attendance
meeting.
check?
24th, the week of the 21st and the week of the 28th.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yes, we have a long October month, so
Thank you.
enjoy.
How are you going to be able to do anything without us?
It's so hard.
Is everyone going to be available for the Thursday, the 7th meeting?
Yep.
Do you have any?
I think David will be back as well.
Peter, you good?
Yeah, I'm 95%.
Okay. Cool. Should we call it a night?
Yes, please.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Live from Paris, en France 24.